I don't really like that song very much. Actually, I was just trying to keep things subtle because of what's ahead. Hey guys, this is the Ecron Writer here. Welcome you to another OBS project. And this one happens to be a very crucial event in my F-Zero timeline. Because as you can see in the cover art, Rick is actually planning on marrying my OC, Tinsel Steelus. I am so excited about this. So, this was a very hard chapter, very hard story to make, as well as a soundtrack, a very hard soundtrack to make, because there weren't a lot of options. So, anyway, this is To Be Married and Loved, which actually takes place in October of 2577, which is after all of my F-Zero fics. So this happens to be the latest one in my F-Zero fanfic series. So let's get this thing going. Alright, here we are, lap 1, To Be Married and Loved. This was a project I wanted BerryWatterson to do, but it was entirely up to me. I often don't ask people to do requests since they can be unreliable, but this was worth it. On October 9th, 2577, this would be the day when Rick Wheeler and Tinsel Steelus will finally tie the knot. Actually, this is the second anniversary of the day since they first met, when Rick was desperate to save kids from terminal illness and retrieve medicine that was stolen by space pirates led by Samurai Goro. Even better is the fact that the 4th episode was released on the Fox Box on October 9th, 2004, the first episode I had seen, hence the events of The Samurai Returns, and after a couple years they're finally ready to be married and loved. So here's their story. Actually, here's a flashback scene. It was at the old Queenly course of Porttown on Valentine's Day when Rick popped the question to his beloved Tinsel Steelus. He knew Twilight was the perfect time to do so, as she's usually found stargazing and taking in its blissful scenery there. He finally knelt down to her and whispered his words of appreciation. She was completely stunned. "You've always been there for me, as I've been for you. I'm grateful I was able to meet a kindred friend. Ever since I was lamenting over Haruka, you were always supportive, and you've saved my life numerous times. When Zoda and Deathborn were defeated, and when Miss Killer was gone, Haruka was finally able to find peace. It's what she'd always wanted over the past 150 years, and she and I would never have found it if it wasn't for you. And so I decided to pass on a part of her love to you." Rick took out the ring and held it up. "I am now glad our lives will finally be completed, and all I have is you to thank for." Her eyes blurred from his heartfelt gesture and words. "Tinsel Steelus, will you marry me?" She gazed onto the ring for a few more minutes. She could have sworn her body was trembling deep inside. She slowly lowered herself until she was the same height as him. Her voice quivered as she spoke with a huge grin. "Yes, Rick, I will marry you." Even his smile grew wider while he slid the sacred century-and-a-half jewel onto her finger. The touch was warm, and the ring itself was a perfect fit for her delicate digit. He gave her the case for safekeeping. Tinsel leaned in and they kissed passionately. Through her sudden tears, both she and Rick wouldn't want anything more. They finally had the opportunity to officially become a couple. That was only last year, and since that fateful life-changing night, Rick and Tinsel had decided that their wedding should be on October 9th, 2577. 2 years since the day they first met when he went to planet Kryton and began his search for Samurai Goro. Ever since, ideas developed in Tinsel's mind in rapid succession. It was in the middle of March, and since it was 7 months before the deadline, the pair thought it'd be a decent time to prepare for the festivities. To start, Rick thought aloud, "I think we should plan on what we should wear for our upcoming union." She then recalled the murmur of Lily Flyer made while they were visiting Planet Giant during a week-long vacation salvage mission on saving the universe from Don Genie and the 3 ancient wrathing deities. If you've seen the short story The Power of the Falcon, you should know this. The young stern cadet of the Galactic Space Forces was wearing a delicate, flowing white dress with pink roses across it. To them, it almost looked like a petite wedding gown, and she coaxed there was something they can look forward to in the distant future. "What do you think? This may be good for your upcoming matrimony, Tinsel." "Yeah, but I'd much rather have it to be all silvery and lustrous." Tinsel turned it down like all other things. It should be as bright and silvery as a comet, as well as her own machine, the Silver Comet. And thus she wanted a medium-sized shimmering wedding dress with actual comets descending it. She actually had this vision as she was using acrylic paints on a bank representing one of the most overrated princesses that the corrupt simulating company Disney had concocted. I have no regrets on describing that. However, she knew that the process of designing it by a professional tailor would be rather expensive. They then went to the task force base and discussed their ideas with their closest friends. Upon hearing Tinsel's suggestions for her outfit, Lucy decided to get involved using her own earnings. Since she became a promising successor to the late Dr. Theodore Clash, but still worked as an F-Zero racer part-time, her pay has increased. "I would love to pitch in, Tinsel. I always love shopping for fabulous clothes. Besides, this should give me some pointers if I ever want to do the same thing for Leon." On top of that, Tinsel always hated wearing stilettos, as she and Rick know of her poor gait and balance. "I hate stilettos. I never wear stilettos. Like Tinsel, I always wear like flat shoes. I too have poor balance." So she eventually decided that when they should go in search, a pair of dazzling 6.5 flat shoes matching her dress would suit her well. "So what made you decide on your spiffy outfit, Wheeler?" he responded with a smile. "Well, I was thinking I could have a tuxedo, but rather a dark cerulean suit similar to the shades of the late Douglas J. Falcon's uniform in conjunction with my own machine, the Blue Falcon GT. He also thought he could use the Golden Falcon pin as a nice touch, even a long tie with that same shade as his suit." Which is, as you've seen on the cover art, little spoilers there. "That seems to be a great choice." "Yeah, since it'll look suitable to Captain Falcon." "Those are admirable choices, Rick and Tinsel," Jody said. "Although you must decide very carefully on picking clothes for the groomsmen and bridesmaids as well." She suggested the group for everyone who will be invited to assist and choose wisely of their spending and styles. "What type of wedding are you planning on?" "I believe a common white wedding would do." She advised that their outfits must match with the type of the ceremony, and that each member must cooperate on their own costs for the outfits. And Dr. Stewart suggested a personal tailor he had used with his former wife, as well as his second one. The next day, Rick and Tinsel went with him and Lucy to work out with a tailor, which actually turned out to be Bert Lemming, aka Andy Summer. "You're actually a tailor, Bert?" He revealed his secret at the Falcon House. "Of course. I have always worked with them ever since I started my new career as the head of the Falcon House. Staying formal and measuring for the perfect fit is very important for business." After an hour with some discussion, Bert measured Rick, Tinsel, and their friends within the task force, and it was agreed that each of the bridesmaids shall pay up to 450 space credits for their dresses, and 400 space credits maximum for the ushers' suits. Even Bert had decided to spend his earnings on a fancy suit of his own. However, there was another challenge. The tailor asked how many people should attend. Before a decision would be made, the couple left and got to work. Wow, that was short. The oversaturated princess in the bank I was painting were references to Frozen. For my birthday just a few years ago, I received it, even though I was never a fan of the movie, which I'm not. Let It Go was I instantly had a vision of what Tinsel would look like if she were to be wed to Rick. And as you saw on the cover, this was that said bank. I should thank BerryWatterson for the suggestions on using a tailor as well. I never would have carried this chapter forward if it wasn't for that, so thank you. Our next challenge is to see how many invites should be chosen for the wedding, as well as who they are and who would make it for the ceremony. So stay tuned for that. Until then, this is the Ecron Writer signing out.
Here we go now.
You might be missing some of the benefits that stereo can provide.
I wish it didn't cut out at the end. Welcome back to another lap of To Be Married and Loved. Last time, Rick and Tinsel have actually decided to tie the knot on October 9th, 2577, which is actually a year, well actually 2 years, after they first met during Rick's salvage mission while he was looking for Samurai Goro at Planet Krypton for the stolen medication to heal those kids, which were the events of my one-shot The Samurai Returns. And coincidentally, this was the same date that was released on the Fox box back in 2004, the first anime episode I had seen. And thus, Rick and Tinsel had decided to visit Bert, who actually happens to be their personal tailor. And Tinsel actually got the idea of her own wedding dress from a bank that she has been painting with acrylic paints, and Rick has decided to use a cerulean tux, or rather a suit, based on Captain Falcon's attire. So, they still have a long way to go, and so they prepare themselves with the invites for the upcoming wedding. So let's get this started. Alright, lap 2. Of course, invitations had to be made, so back at the apartment, both Rick and Tinsel unanimously agreed to send over their friends from the Elite Mobile Task Force, as well as their comrades from the outside. From their mentor Bert to Luna and Rodney Stewart, her son Phoenix Levin, which was an idea from Butterscotch Pie, including Luna, the mighty gazelle Roy Hughes, his son Clank, and his best friend Alias, as well as his mom. When they got to thinking of the latter group, Rick suggested, I think Samurai Goro and his family should also be invited. Tinsel, of course, turned bitter and rejected his decision. Please don't give me that. That may be space... He sighed. Please don't give me that. They may be space pirates, but they won't start any more trouble since there'd be a ton of people. After all, he is my sensei, and he has taught me a lot involving my inner strength and our Japanese heritage. She hoped they wouldn't send in more threats. She could never get over the scoundrels they'd employed on the antics they caused throughout the galaxy, even incorporating his resentful rivalry with the late Captain Falcon. And since John Tanaka was his better self after his recovery from Dark Million's thrall, which is an ending at all, Jody spread the news to his office and he volunteered to be the head of security. Looking back, he has regretted his wimpy actions from before. Let's hope the real John Tanaka would do the same, huh? Ugh, I hated his wimpiness in GP Legend. And his machine sucks, so I'm not very crazy about him. Heck, he even passed it on to the commissioner, so he also wanted to be a part of it personally. He was a little sorry he couldn't make it to the task force's last union, which was Jack Levin and Luna Stewart. It was actually from Butterscotch's one-shot. I forgot what it was called. Series of Unfortunate Events. Something like that. I'll probably give you a link or something. Tinsel also thought of her former duelist friends Yugi Muto and Joey Wheeler. She contacted the former's home at Domino City. His grandfather Solomon picked up. She asked if his prodigy was there, to which he answered, and he was ecstatic with the news. He requested for Joey, Taya, Tristan, and Makuba to come, though he reminded her that Seto, as far as they knew, used the quantum cube and transferred his soul into the netherworld to reunite with someone special. Hence his kid brother was in charge of his business. In fact, Yami, aka Atem with his real name and restored memory, can't make it. Yami? He can't make it to the wedding? But why? Has he passed away? Rick noticed her voice beginning to crack while holding the receiver. What's wrong? It's the ancient Egyptian pharaoh Yami. But his real name's Atem. Yugi said he can't make it to the wedding. What? But why? Kid said it was best if he should show them rather than tell them. They needed to wait several minutes for him to arrive in Mute City by hovercab. When he did, he didn't hesitate. Little did I know that Yami actually passed away in dark-sided dimensions, which I didn't bother with. While they were using a warp gate following directions from a GPS, Yugi showed Tinsel and Rick the burial site to where the sacred Millennium Puzzle was dismantled. At the abandoned Millennium Chamber, a secret cove which used to house all the cursed and blessed items of ancient Egypt, including Pegasus' Eye and Merrick's Rod. He explained after the dimensional battle, Atem guided Yugi and his friends one last time against a duelist named Diva in Kaiba Corp's virtual world. Tinsel was astonished they were dragged into that same warp dimension again since their quest on rescuing Seto and Mokuba in a video game, which is the filler episodes. I actually like them, by the way, the virtual world saga. Sadly, after the puzzle was reconstructed, he was no longer in it. However, he was able to arrive and assist Yugi and Kaiba against the corrupt duelist, as well as the schizophrenic powers emanating from the Millennium Ring. Ugh. Bakura. Or is it Baruch? No, Bakura. Ugh. Never liked him that much. By the time the trio got there and surveyed the damage of the relics, Rick and Tinsel paid their respects with a moment of silence, and they shall never forget him nor his valiant deeds on assisting the late Captain Falcon and saving the universe. With the Silver Comet pilot starting to tear up, Rick tended to her, and the couple hoped that Atem would watch over them just as Falcon, Dr. Clash, and Haruka would. Tinsel wanted to send her invitations to Joey Wheeler and Mokuba Kaiba. When the Go-Lucky Duelist received the call, he actually requested to invite his sister, Serenity, his best friends Tristan Taylor and Taya Gardner, and even his girlfriend, May Valentine, to which Tinsel has some disdain for. Ugh, so do I. Never liked Mai very much. She's such a... Ugh. Like a backstabber. She acts like a narcissist. She's so goddamn snobby. Ugh. I never liked her. The trio then had decided to visit Yugi's old flame Taya. After he and his closest pals graduated from high school, which is after Dark-Sided Dimensions, they watched her take a jet one way from Domino City to Rick and Tinsel's hometown in order to pursue her lifelong dream as a professional ballet dancer. The couple were surprised that she wound up in Mute City and they didn't even notice her. In fact, it had been forever since the last time Tinsel saw her, which was just before she, Yugi, and Joey set foot on their adventures while following Falcon and participating in his dire missions, which is the events of Falcon's followers. They were fortunate that Yugi never lost touch, and Tinsel was curious if she was his love interest at one time. It was never easy in a long-distance relationship, nor Taya following her new career. Nevertheless, they stopped by at one of the places she frequented, and they had to wait till her audition was done. In the meantime, Yugi contacted Joey, Tristan, and Mokuba of the upcoming matrimony. As she was finally done, Taya felt so thrilled, though she hardly remembered Tinsel. Yugi reminded the tyro on who she was and how she was a former duelist trainee, as well as an assistant to him, Joey, and Yami. Even when she was borrowing monsters during certain emergencies, such as the ones at the Crystal Cup and the Fake Star Cup. It stirred up some bitter memories for Rick, though. You'll see those episodes. Crystal Cup was actually supposed to be the Christmas Cup in Japan, which is like double jeopardy. And the Fake Star Cup was actually the Sniper Pico. Rick actually got a huge probation for both events. Damn you, Jody! He was only trying to do the right thing and help Alias twice. Well, counting the Samurai Returns. Still, ugh. Believe it or not, even though it's been 6 months after the farewell of Yami when he retrieved his memories, which is the last episode in the classic Yu-Gi-Oh!, Taya actually guided them through the invitation process, such as making a large list of invites including their names, addresses, and contact info. The first step was to set a date including the couple's names and the date and time of marriage. Second was the invitations, to which they should be sent out at least 6 weeks before the due date, including names of couple, date, location, and time. Tay explained the RSVP card was a smaller card that's sent with the invitation. This was an optional but helpful inclusion to the package. She informed them it comes with an envelope and gives the recipient of the invitation the ability to tell the pairing if they are coming, the number of guests, and their preferred dish for the dinner. The recipient would have to mail them back to Rick and Tinsel in Mute City so they'd know how many people their wedding would need to be prepared for. Taya actually suggested directions to where the wedding would be, since some of their friends could be far away. She would also help on creating and sending multiple samples, but her schedule could be pretty tight. If not, they may choose Lucy and Luna instead. When the soon-to-be couple arrived back at their flat, it reminded them of their personal transport from the reception to their honeymoon. They had chosen and discussed with PJ upon using his groovy taxi instead of a fancy limo, as they reminisced taking him in after the explosive incident at the Imperial colony, which you would see my first video project, PJ the Imperial colonist, to which the adorable alien accepted it. So eventually, once the invitations were developed by Taya and were being sent out, the rambunctious Arrows got wind of the announcement. So, they received the pair's number and wanted to be a part of the action, much to Tinsel's uncertainty. If you've seen Cold as Ice, my one-shot, you should know this. I'm not too crazy about the Arrows, especially Super Arrow. Believe it or not, though, I actually like him over Captain Quark from Ratchet and Clank. I believe that Super Arrow is a lot more tolerable than he is. And I wish there was a death battle. As she was trying to voice her opinions, Mr. Arrows always talked her off and immediately took the offer without receiving the package. As Actaman got his invite, he can only bring in one of his cephalopod kin, while the rest of his family has to stay in Takora for security reasons. How big is your family, anyway? Counting my wife and kids. Oh, I would say about 20 and counting. Ah, jeez! Sorry I asked. Believe it or not, it's actually based on Octoman's dream in the anime. It might be more than 20, though. Maybe 200, I don't know. But it was crazy. I didn't like it very much. Soon enough, Lily Flyer of the Galactic Space Forces beat Louis Legend, Catherine Wilson, and Cynthia Gray were also added to the list, though they had never heard anything back from them weeks later. It was obvious since Lily was too busy as a young cadet, while the others remained unconfirmed. Altogether, there were 36 applicants for the wedding, with just 250 space credits ahead. So, inviting the latter 4 characters were suggested by my old friend Buttscotch. However, since she had been absent for over a year on DeviantArt, and is still absent a lot, working with them would be too complicated. Pardon me, Buttscotch, since they had been omitted. If only I would have the chance to see and work with you again. Ever since she started college, I'm not sure when she would ever return. Anywhere, actually. Well, actually, she finished college and she got a new laptop, but I never heard from her again. Especially with the pandemic going on. Speaking of complications, I never saw the movie Dark Side of Dimensions. I hadn't watched the Yu-Gi-Oh! Series all the way through due to its mounting complex plots there, starting with the Wake of the Dragons. So I kind of bailed on the movie as well. Also, it wasn't a smart idea releasing it alongside DBZ's film, Watch Wrath of the Gods. It's like comparing an ant to a human foot. You got squashed badly, 4K media. And that was why I found out so late on what happened to Yami and Atem. It really was a hard loss knowing he's in the netherworld now, as his Kaiba, which was a huge relief. I guess the cute Mokuba would be a successor? Anyway, not everyone was invited to the occasion, which was good, considering the fic would avoid complications and also make the preparations a little bit cheaper. So, I guess that's it for this lap. Until then, this is the Ekron Writers signing out. Stay tuned for the next lap. And by the way, the intro that I played, the Top Gear 2 theme, was actually a theme I chose for Rodney Stewart, believe it or not. So, see you guys later. actually like the original version of Silent Dream Chaser over GP Legends. Very cool. Welcome back to another lap of To Be Married and Loved. Last time, Tinsel and Rick have actually met up with Taya Gardner from the classic Yu-Gi-Oh! Series, and she was achieving her lifelong dream as a ballet dancer since this took place years after they graduated high school, and they've actually paid their respects with Yugi to say goodbye to Atem. Yeah, the Millennium Puzzle was dismantled, and Yami actually had his very last duel with Diva, which was the events for the Dark Side of Dimensions, and Atem, along with Kaiba, bit the dust. So they transferred their souls to the Netherworld, and Tinsel didn't know. She thought Atem would still be around to participate in the wedding, but yeah, this was a very tragic loss to them. And after that, they met up with Taya, who was a ballet dancer in Mute City, from Domino City, actually. So, Taya actually gave them advice on how to use invites for the wedding. And of course, Super Arrow barged in, he got wind of it somehow, and he actually wanted to participate. Bad. Ugh, you know how annoying Super Arrow is. At least he's better than Captain Quark, that's for sure. So, the wedding is drawing closer and closer as they know it. So let's get this started. Alright, lap 3. Rick and Tinsel split up to cover more ground, and the RSVPs were being sent out. He first visited planet Krypton to deliver the invitations to Goro and his family. Fortunately, he held his band of thieves at bay as they wanted to steal his advanced machine. I'm warning you, Sensei, that the Galaxy Platoon would be watching your every move, and I would highly suggest you arrive discreetly using your F-Zero machines instead of your spacecrafts. He was referring to the Fire Needle and Excellent Queen. Otherwise, they'd be shot down, so it was best to never mess around. The Japanese warrior nodded with a smile. I honor your union, kid. You'd best make sure you would have the Federation's permission. You and me both best not stir up any tension. Especially with Jody. While the Savior was heading back to Earth just an hour later, the King Meteor unexpectedly followed beside him. Super Arrow couldn't stop begging to be a part of this upcoming wedding. To shut him up, Rick reluctantly gave 3 of the packages to him as he delivered them to his wife and kid immediately. Zook squawked next to him. Zook is the owl, by the way, although it's weird because in X, Super Arrow used to own a pet falcon, but in GX and from then on, especially in the anime, he owns an owl. Like, come on, I hate the series' inconsistency. Tinsel had to follow her GPS in her silver comet as she had forgotten the way to Domino City. The bustling streets made it more of a challenge to find Yugi's and Solomon's home, though. She gave them 8 invitations, and only 6 of those were for his best friends his best friends Joey, Mokuba, Serenity, Tristan, Tia, and Mai. While she was heading back to Mute City, Rick stopped by the Falcon House and offered Clank to deliver 3 invitations to Alias's home, as well as their friendly rival Digiboy. He beamed and accepted them with glee, though he had to ride in his dad's Red Gazelle in order to get to these places. At least Clank wouldn't hijack another machine like he did in the debut episode, The Boy from Forno. Finally, they rendezvoused back at the Mobile Task Force base, or actually it's called Flashback, and Dr. Stewart offered to deliver the fancy invitations to his kids. Jack would bring one to the high-flying medico's grandson. Still, something was beginning to trouble the bright mind. as he was anxious to hear from someone he hadn't seen in years, someone very distant, elusive, or possibly forever gone from his life. I'll get to that later, but this was an idea from Butterscotch. In addition, food preparations had to be requested by the invites, so Bert, Lucy, Elise's mom, Luna, and Stodie, Stuart and Jody, they should be an official couple, decided to prepare them by the month before the occasion. To cut costs, Stuart suggested to make a buffet utilizing a variety of dishes. And to avoid chaos and skyrocketing payments, Jody volunteered it could be a very dry wedding rather than have it served with any alcohol. Although a professional was hired to bake the cake, the couple wasn't sure exactly what flavor it should be, nor did they want any of the festive decor. After a couple weeks, Tinsel eventually decided on something basic, as to have the top layer chocolate, the second layer vanilla, and the third layer strawberry. Although it should actually be backwards, because the bottom layer is like the most massive. Anyway, Rick admired the simplicity and the deliciousness of her choice. Only the majority of guests accepted, around 97%, have returned within a month. As the packages were sent back, Tinsel made a spreadsheet highlighting some of the cells, while others had yet to be answered were left blank. Rick and Tinsel were both surprised that Kate and her midget manager, Gordon, offered to come along and put on a show for this special occasion. You know, Kate Allen. Ugh, BerryWatterson is gonna gush over this. In fact, Rick's key fob began to chirp as Tinsel was looking over the digital repertoire. He picked up the call and there was a cheery voice at the other end. "Rick, is that you?" "Yeah." He then recognized the voice and smiled. "Kate! What a surprise! I never thought you of all people would be calling me." "I never want to miss the chance on performing for you and Tinsel's wedding. Congratulations!" Yeah, thanks." "Hey, wait! How did you know we were getting married?" "Who else would have broken the news? EAD did." "Oh, that starstruck android." "You don't mind if Gordon and I should participate, would you? I've already gotten the invitations mailed to us already." "Not at all, Kate. I hope it won't be too much of a burden for you." He can never forget how stern she was when he and his colleagues had to give her 24-hour protection from Zoda after she won the prize money over him, which is her debut episode, Dangerous Diva, aka songstress Kate Allen. Ugh. I had a bitter start with her. I was turned off by her. I wanted to like her, but I was never crazy about her in the series, not even GX. I don't know why, but something always turned me off, especially her attitude. And also how her fans used to pressure her so much. It was thanks to the friendship and valiance from EAD, as well as his temporary sacrifice, that changed her ways. Even though she actually called him a stupid robot. Really, Kate? Really? Couldn't be just more grateful? Anyway, they were still so astounded that Clash was able to restore him, albeit not his memories of Kate. If you've seen the episode, you should know that. Course not. Besides, EAD and I would be doing some Sorry. Course not. Besides, EAD and I would be doing some shopping for our nifty outfits. And we could use some alone time before the big day. You know, just to relax for a while. Although having the possibility of a human mating with an android can be pretty weird, for his stomach was tangled in knots. Ugh, BerryWatterson, you have those outrageous ideas. Still, he replied with a straight face. Sure, okay. Great! I'll see you in October. She sing-songed at the end before she hung up and left Rick speechless. Even more shocking was that Jack offered his own former band Thunderbolt to join in. Although I wish it was highlighted more in the anime, whether it's alternate continuity or not, because Jack used to belong in a band. He was a punk rocker. Like, ugh, it should have been highlighted in the anime too, just saying. Rick immediately said yes, as did Luna, and the punk would never mind how much it'll cost him, as brash as he was. What else is new? Since he was his best man, he would be willing to do anything to make Rick's matrimony a memorable one, even to defend him in a brawl. Rick soon asked Tinsel, and she thought that their wedding could take place at the first track from the original F-Zero, the Mute City track. He figured it was unusual, but since it was an old circuit, there wouldn't be any racers to run anything nor anyone over. The latter event would just take place at the other side of the track. Rick then asked where she wants the honeymoon, and she immediately answered it'd be in Port Town Space Harbor. No question, since it was the largest and most advanced in the entire galaxy. At first, Rick was disappointed it won't be at Memory Park, where he was taken Haruka once while he reminisced her enjoying the scenery with a flock of gulls and laughed heartedly the whole way through. Again, from the anime. Specifically Jodie's secret. When they went to the Falcon House for their usual beverage, Rick then asked what Bert's role would be. He said it could be the marriage officiant. Even the server was impressed on... darn scrolls. It's so annoying. He was impressed on Tinsel's unique choice of their union and reception since it'd be inexpensive, as the circuit remains inactive for years. It was actually better than going to any formal church, even occupying it for a reception. And in order to cut costs more, photography would have to be done professionally by a friend, and who knows technology well, say Clank and Mighty Gazelle? They both unanimously volunteered to take on the task, or better yet, the young tech geek would want to use a little friend of his to do the job proficiently and hands-free. His bot he invented, Tech, and he retorted he would never be willing to invite any of the self-centered children from the foreigner orphanage. I can't blame him. But I may be confusing him with John Tanaka, but I think he used to have a robot friend, especially when he drives the Dragon Bird in Climax. I could be wrong. Rick and Tinsel extended the time limit for any last-minute invitees by giving them all of summer to hear from them, despite retrieving the packages within 30 days. Unfortunately, Beat, Catherine Gray, Lewis Legend from Dark Purveyors, and Catherine Wilson didn't give them back. So much for Cat being the flower girl. This was an original idea, by the way, but it just got too complicated. Dr. Stewart said Kat's address is unknown and is very elusive, though we thought he shouldn't alert his daughter of her whereabouts just yet. With every RSVP retrieved, Stody created a list of each food preference, though kids would have their choices monitored closely, obviously. So, here's what I got so far. For Jodie, it was fondue. Wine had to be cut. I hear it was her favorite type of food, by the way, from the anime. For Stewart, it's healthy choices, well balanced. Tanaka, none. Commissioner, none. Chris is gator, exotic meat, and Mediterranean veggies. Octoman, no calamari or seafood. To be politically correct, the couple accepted to eliminate seafood. Tinsel wasn't too disappointed, and it'll also cut down on costs since fish is highly expensive. I am a huge seafood lover, despite it being expensive, but hey, what do you expect? Octoman is an octopus. It's a cephalopod, so no calamari. Alright, for PJ, it's the exotic mangoes, the same ones that Alias prefers. I forgot their names. I guess you could look it up on the F-Zero wiki. For Gordon, Kate's manager, would be ramen noodles with small meatballs. Gomer and Shio, artichoke cooked chestnuts. Jack, anything spicy. Ugh, he's so brash. They decided a variety of sauces would be put aside, such as hot sauce, buffalo, teriyaki, soy, and barbecue. For Luna Stewart, it would be butterscotch pie, based on the author's name. For Rodney, same as his dad, healthy choices. Lucy, carrot cake. Leon, tender meat, medium. No rare meats. If you would have seen Ending It All during the semifinals, you would find out that Pico is into raw meat because of the toxoplasma. And there was a strict rule in the Falcon House saying, unless if it's cold cuts, every meat has to be cooked, either medium to well done because it'll cause like road rage and things like that. For EAD, spaghetti, eggplant, parm. Kate is coffee, sherbet, and veal. Yugi is hibachi, chicken or beef. Fried ice cream, either chocolate, vanilla, or banana. For Solomon, it's miso, either tofu or seaweed. And dashi soup, either sea vegetables or mushrooms. I always love the Japanese soups. Very nice. And Joey, ugh, spaghetti and meatballs, lasagna, steak, turkey, sushi, hamburgers, hot dogs, nachos, soda, baked ice cream, filet mignon. As a person who loves to eat, he listed a plethora of entrees being written off the invitation. Tinsel was surprised, but Rick was more somber as he questioned if he remembered Bert's limitations of up to 3 entrees per person, while Dr. Stewart and his family would make the exceptions and exceptions. For Serenity, there was fruit slushies and souffle. For my coconut cake, Taya, tossed salad, fruit salad, jello. Tristan, nachos and hibachi. Mokuba, ramen, tenderloin, favorite of Kaiba. I actually made that up. For Roy, it's curry. As a robot, Roy can't eat, but rather has to be refueled. He did decide on curry with his son, though. And it sucks when you're a robot. For Clank, it would be curry and chili. For Terry Digiboy Getter from AX, it's chili, preferably spicy, rice pudding, either with cinnamon, raisins, and vanilla. Elias and his mom decided on the exotic mangoes that he likes. Tinsel complains since the mangoes are interplanetary, they could be pricey too. Rick stated that maybe Roger and Drac can help. So, for Goro, there's rice balls and oriental vegetables. He'd make them personally, translated from his native language via Falcon's computer program. Well, the invitation was translated. For Lisa, it would be snake and seaweed. They decided on kale instead. The Arrows, Mr. Arrow preferred crazy ideas involving angel food or strawberry shortcake. Mrs. Arrow argued they must choose wisely for Archer, like non-chewable ideas. For Zuck, pet owl, birdseed, or pumpkin seeds? Berries? Ugh, I wasn't sure with him. Roger and Drac would offer to help for deliveries of food and supplies. A cooler loaded with ice would be set aside for cold beverages, even soda, a variety of juices, seltzer, and iced coffee. Whew, glad that's done. Several years back, my family and I had to make some arrangements for a former acquaintance's wedding who was Indian, the ones that had a red dot on their heads, specifically the bride. The cake itself was actually made by my ex-stepmom herself. She always had a thing for culinary arts, and each layer was both baked and covered with layers of icing of the corresponding flavor. There was chocolate, then vanilla, and strawberry on that. Ironically, it wasn't celebrated in a church, but rather at our own backyard, as was my parents' wedding as well, back in mid-August 2003. At the yard, There was this small arching and flowers were decorated over it, hence the inspiration of the decor. The little robot I was referring to, Tech, despite the fact it was the geek's name in the English dubs, I like Clank better, was his assistant as he would pilot the Dragonbird EX like he did in Climax, I believe. But that's only the beginning. So, stay tuned for the next lap. Whoops. Until then, this is the Econ Writer signing out.
One, two, three, four. Hey, lady, you don't have to have a lonely night. Space, lady, just come with me and I'm gonna treat you right. Oh, you're tricky, baby. I misunderstood your saucy eyes. Now I know you're faded, and I'm gonna be alone tonight. Pouty lips, moist and wanting, what they're never wanting, what I'm offering. At the furthest boundary of the universe, we pass by each other so inebriated. Lonely nights, mystified, solitary, not so merry, lonely nights. Come on, baby, why don't you just hold me tight? Lonely night, lonely night. I'm mystified, lonely nights, mystified, lonely nights, mystified, lonely nights, mystified, lonely nights.
I'm not really a huge fan of Space Dandy, as I find it to be a little more inferior to Cowboy Bebop. I don't care if it's a sister series or a spiritual successor, but I find Cowboy Bebop to be a lot better than Space Dandy. I tried one episode and I just bailed. And this idea was actually from Butterscotch Pie, because she used Lonely Nights from Space Dandy as a theme song for Luna Stewart. Crazy, huh? Welcome back to another lap of To Be Married and Loved. Last time, the invitations were sent back, along with the food preferences, and there were some that actually were unconfirmed. Those being Lewis Legend from the Dark Purveyors and Lollipop Chainsaw, by the way. Some ideas from Butterscotch. There was also like Catherine Wilson, Cat as the Flower Girl. There were just OCs made by Butterscotch. There were just some ideas that never returned, and I just didn't know what to do with them. So, the wedding is still on, and Kate has actually decided to become their performers during the wedding and the reception, as is Jack's band Thunderbolt. So, let's get this started. Alright, lap 4. The first 3 chapters were just a warm-up. Now, things are about to get much more serious. This is the time when Rick and Tinsel put their relationship to the test. Will it thrive before their union within a few months? These 3 were just fun chapters, lighthearted chapters, but this one, it's about to get more intense as Tinsel goes through, let's say, a personal inner conflict. Back in their apartment, Rick was curious and asked Tinsel on who should be her father of the bride, since her parents had passed on years ago. They had been discussing her dark past with Leon, who was sitting and socializing with them over coffee and on a futon. I'm not sure. I wanted it to be Bert, but he's the marriage officiant, so it'd be unfair for him to take on both roles, and kind of odd. I then wanted it to be Stuart, but he's already a father. Her mind began to brainstorm on some possible candidates, including Beastman, EAD, Leon, Octoman, the Fury Cakes? Definitely not Goro or Super Arrow. Roy wouldn't qualify since he's also a dad, albeit mechanized. Each idea seemed more awkward than the last, and she wished that it'd be Captain Falcon if only he hadn't sacrificed himself. She was lost in the sauce as she gave a vacant look, so Rick decided to give Tinsel a little alone time to help her think more clearly and decide on who should be her escort down the aisle. She explained she was only able to remember how her mom died by an armed burglar at the family's mom-and-pop shop and how she never returned when she was only just a preteen. However, she never mentioned her old man since she cannot memorize how he bit the dust. Not even her memos unveiled anything, even the times she has shown him them. Rick found it to be quite suspicious, as if her mind, or rather she, was missing something. So he gave her a little privacy at the top floor to think things over on who should she pick. For sympathy and comfort, Leon wanted to tag along as he could relate to her predicament since he too lost his parents at a young age, while his homeworld Zhao was under an intense war. As a result, his people remained in poverty, even the pups, and the impact reduced him to a mere orphan, much like Clank and Forno. Until he was taken in temporarily by the Arrows, he would always consider them to be his heroes, no matter how arrogant and ignorant the pseudo-Caped Crusader was. The Rick turned him down. The canine let out a low growl, which to Rick thought it represented irritation or discontent. Oh, so you're thinking I'm forcing her to find answers, huh? Thinking to Rick as a detective he was being intrusive. He scorned at the canine's delivery. Rick rushed over to Tinsel's side and ordered Leon to stay put, just how he would any other canine. He arrived upstairs to see her on the bed, hyperventilating. He thought she was suffering from a nightmare or hallucination with her placid, blotchy face. Rick immediately tended her and kept telling her to take in deep breaths and to look into his eyes. She calmed a little, but her breathing and voice were still shallow. While in shock, Tinsel stated in a choppy manner she was curious in who should be the father of the bride. Then she started to think of her deceased old man. Her brain opened like an egg. She realized she was estranged from him, the one she left several years ago and actually found herself at the apartment in Mute City, the same one that she and Rick are currently staying at. Bert was indeed her father figure for quite some time, giving her advice and assurance, and sheltered her through the storm, so she thought he could be her escort instead. But why didn't you bring him up in the first place? You only mentioned you lost both your parents. Tinsel was surprised that none of her past memos opened any wounds, yet this did. He knew right from then she had some repressed memories, and they're scaring her to death. Looking into her eyes deeply, he said, Tinsel, you need some help. I'll contact Doctor immediately. He went and did just that when he requested for Dr. Stewart and his family to treat her deep psychological wounds. They didn't hesitate, and the high-flying medico was shocked that therapy usually unveils tragic pasts, yet she did on her own. She didn't understand why her mind forgot all this, yet she could always remember her accident in Whiteland vividly. Rick sympathized since he could always recall the fatal accident chasing Zoda. So minutes later, he and Dr. Stewart got on the case. They went to the task force base at the scenery chamber. Tinsel ranted to Robert, Rodney, and Luna that her own father considered physical attraction as his utmost priority over anything else, including a female soul and personality, since he'd grown infatuated with inhabitants of the southern Asian colony. In order for someone to be loving to him, particularly when he was lovesick and contacted them from a long distance via comp connections. From then on, she was being forced to move with him against her will, then left for dead, and she mentioned she's been neglected multiple times. Luckily, Bert helped her through it so much by finding an affordable, safe place and sheltered her at the apartment complex adjoining the Falcon House. He wasn't arrested for harboring, though, like she always dreaded. This surprised the doc since he regretted his feelings for his past wife and his current wife, Catherine Wilson, as he was mostly attracted to them thanks to the Florence Nightingale effect. While it was hurting for his children to hear, they understood, especially since he wanted to give his heart to Jody, hence the merged code name. God, I wish that couple was official. Better than Jody and Captain Falcon, or worse, John Tanaka. Ugh. He came to the prognosis as trauma-induced amnesia. Tinsel went on it was a hobby of sorts to his farce father, and she felt he always wanted to rush relationships while considering intimacy first, as she always thought men think with their heads instead their own testicles, that is. She then understood why most criminals are male regardless of the species, and she had a new reason on denying love for anyone, as he uses sex as a weapon while acting as a horrible role model. Indeed he was. This was indeed devastating since the father is known to be a role model to his offspring, especially involving the opposite gender to a woman. Since Tinsel portrayed him as a poor example, she shunned men in general, and hence she was cold as ice, afraid to open up to others, till somehow her brain restarted all the trauma she endured, as she was settling in on her own, and thanks to Bert's ongoing support. Tinsel was devastated, and to calm her shaken nerves, Dr. Stewart's mind sharpened and looked up the obituary, the result of a fatal tsunami which devastated the colony, specifically the Philippines. She indeed felt a bit sad, but always fortunate that she acted as soon as she did. It was too late to press charges on Bert, and she has ill will toward Dad as a result. She figured it was an act of God punishing the wicked. The children wish their own elders won't be so brash like he was. Luna and Rodney. The trio physicians assured her she did the right thing and averted her death, as everyone's responsible for their own fate and has every right to change their destiny, much as Captain Falcon and Rick. Stewart encouraged her that Rick shall never let her down, and she should never be afraid to accept him and their upcoming sacred bond just a few months away. He then questioned if she was a breastfeeder, to which she replied no, and asked why. That was the true solution as to why she was always turned off with a man's privates, even when she admitted that her birth was by C-section. He said the result could be placental abruption, a rare condition with severe complications, and leaves the infant a lack of nutrients and oxygen by detaching from the uterus wall. The causes vary, and he theorized it could be the father's fault, from his insatiable desire and appetite and how fragile her mom could be. But the most common were tobacco, drinking, or what he believed to be rough friction due to intercourse or physical activity, and the penis going a little too far. No wonder she hates sex so much. Except for Rick. He laid his hands on her shoulders. Tinsel, you'll have to go to him. I know it's hard, but I promise it's going to get better. She was very reluctant if she should open up to him now. Hours later, after some consultation and relaxation, Stewart and his son walked down and stated everything to Rick. What? That self-righteous bastard! What the... What he did was so unforgivable. He deserves to be dead. If he was still alive, I won't hesitate to mangle him myself. Rick, this is not the time to be brash. What's done is done. God did her a favor. Yeah, and besides, Tinsel needs you now. I know it's hard for her to accept, but what do you think you should do? I highly recommend you should write your wedding vows. To always be the opposite of her old man. As unselfish, loyal, never have sex as his topmost priority, nor use it as a weapon and cause him to be astray. Be the gentleman as you were with Haruka, and always make sure that any kind of intimacy would only be between you two, as long as you have her consent. He nodded, trying to absorb his words of wisdom, but from what her mind just unveiled, Rick was fortunate he never suffered such hatred toward his own blood, and didn't have to suffer from trauma and bad blood since he went into a 150-year cold sleep. With that, he's not sure if she'd want to ever be this close to him. Could she want to cancel her wedding? He thought with some upset, knowing such acts could be possible and very common. Well, believe it or not, I'm sort of going through the same thing. I mean, I too was born from C-section, and I was never turned on by a person's private parts. Ugh. I always wanted to look away, and I never have a desire to fall for someone. I mean, hell, I never even got a date. Come on, don't you know that finding friends is hard enough as it is? Online or personally? Forget about it. I ain't taking it to the next level. So, this is a very deep reason why I brought this up. I'm kind of going through the same thing, albeit despite the pandemic. My dad is very lovesick. He too is very lovesick. And with online dating, which I don't believe in, I'm just afraid he would make a big mistake, especially when he goes out of the country. I mean, he loves to travel and all, but, I'm not willing to leave the US, to be honest. If it's for, like, a vacation, then maybe, but if it's permanent, then I would rather not. And I'm just afraid it might go to the same result as Tinsel had went through, hence those ideas. And, God forbid, I don't want that to happen in the near future. So, yeah. And yeah, I would actually say that, Tinsel's went through the same thing with the aberrant placenta, hence her disabilities, just like me. Like I said, things are a lot more serious now. Will Rick and Tinsel's relationship bond hold together, or would it all be for naught? So, good luck to you guys. I'm gonna show you a thing or two, Princia. Welcome back to another lap of To Be Married and Loved. Last time, Tinsel's mind has actually opened up like an egg, literally, and she is just going through very dramatic pangs of her dark past and her repressed memories. And Rick has actually contacted Dr. Stewart, as well as his kids, and they're going to start treatment on her. So their love really is on the line here. And Tinsel, ever since Bert took her in when her father abandoned her when she was a little younger several years ago, Bert actually took Tinsel in and she became sheltered and she just closed off from all men in general, and she hardly trusts anyone unless she had a heart as cold as ice, till she met Rick. But she's been going through a lot of treatment now, and their relationship is truly on the line. You will see soon enough. This is actually a revenge plot here. So, here's lap 5. I just found a Mandela dance by my nemesis, the incredible intruder. It's sort of a rebuttal to that. So if you're a fan of him, know that I have no regrets. I'm about to show no mercy on Incredible Intruder. You would see him on fanfiction and DeviantArt. He has those disgusting harem groups. And he happens to be a fan of Princia. Well, that's all about to change here. Will Rick the young Captain Falcon resist her charm as the former failed to do? Round 2 is about to start. Well, round 1 I haven't presented yet. Not just with the testament of Rick and Tinsel's relationship, but lightning is about to strike twice, since the first one was in my Ocarina of Time Pokemon Creepypasta and Revenge fic, which you would find on the other sites. It's just too risky right now. I don't feel like doing it just yet, but hopefully I will in the future. Anyway, here's lap 5. The Stewarts and Rick gave her the treatment she needed, yet she still finds herself struggling while dealing with her inner traumatic turmoil. Regardless, she vowed she should never care for her estranged father that abandoned her several years back. With that mindset back then, she confessed to Robert, Luna, and Rodney she was too afraid to open up to anyone else, including men. She always believed they're scums of the universe being taken advantage of by manipulative women, or even use sex as a priority and weapon. So she utterly refused to fall in love with anyone, as it'd be something to cripple her independence she fought so long for the way her damn dad did. Her enthralled father was forcing her to relocate from Mute City to the Asian colonies, particularly the Philippines, a third world colony in which she had lust for consistent women far away from online alone. She fought long and hard to stay within the safety, comfort, and advancements of the mega metropolis. So, she received a lot of abuse of all kinds, but sexual, to which she found the succubus's privates, hunger, and orgasms to be quite disturbing. She ran away and needed to seek asylum, but Bert took her in and provided her shelter and support, and right now, she needs it again. Stewart mentioned he looked up an obituary as the archipelago was devastated by a tsunami. Then she screamed as she wished that he wasn't her father since he caused her so much agony and trauma, and got corrupted by his sins of lust and pride. Hence she hollered that he'll never see his late wife in heaven. Stewart came to the conclusion as to why her mind shut down, as a way to attempt to forget all these family affairs and damnation. She had a nightmare later on, and she was smack dab in the middle of a burial surrounded by shades she couldn't recognize. Yet somehow, he was still alive, wishing it was her drowning in that wave instead. She was about to lunge at him, screaming he should have been stabbed, but her body jolted, waking her up and startling. You okay? You were dreaming. She never cried at her dad's funeral and was about to attack him, making sure he was dead rather than an apparition. She'll always hate him for his sins and disregard for her welfare, and Rick understood, and assured that Doc, her therapist, accepted he would be her new father of the bride. Whew, we finally got that out of the way. That actually calmed her down a few notches, and she semi-consciously whispered she would love that. Early the next day, Rick left to pursue a bounty after he received an alert on his key fob. During the middle of her therapy session, which stretched on for several hours, the doc stated that Rick had a marvelous surprise for her. He returned to Mute City from a bounty hunting mission he chose personally, like his first task in Port Town destroying the Hive and the T-virus, which he would actually see in Man of Destiny. Actually, it was for the price of 5, but he lost 1. He was able to infiltrate and shut down several interplanetary brothels, each one run by the Asian colonies on Earth. For each organization broken into, ransacked, and had the head criminals taken into custody, not to mention notifying the Federation afterwards to lock them down, he received over 200,000 space credits altogether. The bounty that had been reported lost was in the Desert Kingdom at Planet Magica. Look, if you guys like Princess Remote and don't use her as fetish fuel, then by all means, kudos to you guys. If you happen to like Princia Remote, then kudos to you. Like I would chastise any of those civil fans out there. Then there are those sick people out there, especially those like Incredible Intruder. Here's why. He followed to a hefty price station there where he met the young adventurous F-Zero racer, Princia Remote. The 16-year-old was actually impressed when she noticed the young Captain Falcon. So, as a reward for carrying on his mantle and for his vigilance, she took him in, showed him around, and finally down to her basement, which actually consisted her own brothel, complete in ruby and crimson. Never being faced by the disturbing aura, she especially appreciated his youth and his actions on infiltrating those other dungeons in order to exterminate competition. So much so that she gave her hero a mandala dance, which she is known for. And she mentioned she was more into him than Samurai Goro, since he treated her like vile, and he stole some valuable goods. Good for him. Luna commented that she can't believe that someone so young was able to manipulate the late F-Zero elitist. She's so cringy. Tell me about it. Remote also mentioned she gave one to his predecessor as a way to relax. The ceremony struck a chord in Rick as she began. However, during his tepid kiss on her navel cavities to seal the deal, Rick! Rick! Stop! Both of his beloveds, Tinsel and Haruka, screamed in his subconscious. No! He abruptly shoved her. She fell back in a comfy beanbag chair. She stood there, stunned over him. My heart belongs to another. He showed her the engagement ring, a replica of Haruka's ring gleaming in the soft light. I wish I would have that jingle. Realizing his refusal, she was scorned, and he slowly left without a word, ignoring any recoils. To prove this, Dr. Stewart told Ronnie to do a DNA test. He just came back, and the clear, transparent aluminum tube shown his semen was clean. He passed with flying colors. The doc then told Tinsel of his wedding vows, which made her feel so ecstatic, as he was proving his worth to her. No one, not even their mesmerizing obedience, could possibly break their bond. It was no wonder Falcon had chosen him as his successor, and why Haruka loves him so much. and his pure heart and faithfulness demonstrated this. It was as if someone from the heavens answered the call. Dr. Stewart left to escort him in, and her daughter explained that there's an abrupt news break broadcasting the place Rick visited. The entire palace was demolished, along with the surrounding oasis. Heck, the compound looked as if it was just Swiss cheese than an actual royal ground, loaded with large holes and craters. It was ironic since Rick nearly destroyed the Asian provinces, yet he lost one because it had already been assaulted from the outside. According to reports, they said it was devastated by a meteor shower, obliterating everyone and everything within it, even Princia's machine known as the Spark Moon, which enabled quite a spark that magnified its destruction. Rather, its destruction. There were also some rumors of the notorious seducer sending out fan mail to unsuspecting victims, including racers, involving the exotic Mandela dance. The same one Rick saw, much to Tinsel's shock. It was a good thing Douglas was oblivious to her later on, or God knows what the hell would happen. So much for the purity of the young. Well, it seems she won't be able to send out those viral vids this time. I'm glad that settlement's been wiped out, Tinsel said in glee. She thought the aforementioned ring somehow shielded Rick from being spellbound, as if Haruka was there, reminding him to not let his heart be tainted again. Could it actually be from Aten? She theorized as a sort of disaster conjured by the ancient Egyptian pharaoh, possibly using Karibo or the five-star Twilight, which she would see in ending it all when they infiltrate Darkstar. She, along with the other onlookers, found it quite odd it just happened moments after Rick left. Very odd. The reverie was interrupted by the sound of footsteps as Rick, minus his helmet, and Stewart entered. Tinsel immediately stood up from her perch and raced over to him, hugging him nearly as tight as an anaconda's coil. The hero was blown away of her delivery, even when she broke into tears. Tinsel, what's wrong? I'm here. I'm not tainted, not even how your father was. I know. I'm just so happy. And the therapy sessions had been hectic involving him. Yeah, I'm certain. I was afraid of you, Rick. I was scared you would lose your way like he did, and I'd been shunning men and people out for so long. Rick added more caressing and pressure on her. So I've heard. I'm so sorry. I know. I'm sorry too. Let's go home, Rick. He leaned in for a deep, warm kiss, which made Luna think about getting back to Jack and Phoenix. Before she left, however, Tinsel looked up and wanted her to wait. Then she asked if she would like to be her maid of honor. She simply smiled and said she shall be honored. Just last June, I had released a revenge fic creepypasta first M-rated fic, The Lost Legend of Nemira, a story as bashing the incredible intruder's own work, The Gerudo Seduction Dance. And it's mature rated, so viewer discretion is advised. I was looking for that fic featuring Princio Remote, that same dance in a way to make Captain Falcon relax in a way. And look what the hell I found! So round 2 was set as Rick resisted Remote's sway over him, making him as one of her many servants, and God knows if she has manipulated women, extraterrestrials, and anthropomorphics too. As Spock would say, highly illogical. I despise that prick! I'm so goddamn sick of Remote being used as fetish fuel! Regardless, if it was intentional, a meteor shower, much like the one in the film Armageddon, has destroyed her, and the palace itself. So, ha! I also implied the fact that Princia's machine as the Spark Moon, ha ha ha! It's no wonder she wanted to control others to let her win races, since the Spark Moon's almost as pathetic as the Silver Rat. I should know since I unlocked both pilots in the past. I guess lightning strikes twice, so they say. To quote something I've heard in Saber Spark's North Korean Lion King vid, which has been taken down, I guess. Be gone, thought! I swear, I felt like I was being stung. Wait, I used that analogy for the Lost Legend. How about, I felt like how Spock's mind overloaded as he tried to meld with Ilea's sensor. That'll be it. I wish Incredible Intruder would notice my middle fingers at his sexualized and domineering work. I shall never let Princia Ramode rule all the galaxy with all her racing servants by her side, nor Falcon. So fuck it! Take that, Incredible Intruder. I'm glad all the resentment has been set aside. So, until then, this is the Ecron Rider signing out. And please don't use Princia Ramode as fetish fuel, or else I'm gonna come after you. So, see you guys later. to another lap of To Be Married and Loved. Last time, Tinsel has been recovering with Dr. Stewart as well as his children after she just went through trauma-induced anxiety thanks to her old man estranging her. And right now, she has been recovering with them ever since. While Rick was busy pursuing a bounty, actually there was like 5 bounties, and his mission was to shut down 5 of the intergalactic brothels in the universe, which were owned by the Asian colonies, although he actually lost one bounty because there was a meteor shower in planet Magica where Princia Ramode was. It was at the Desert Kingdom, and Rick was almost tempted by Princia as the young Captain Falcon. In the past, she did just that with the late Captain Falcon, hence, the revenge plot. And fucking Credible Intruder. It was highly illogical for him to release that fic. But Rick was successful, and he was not tempted by her, and this proved how faithful he was to Tinsel, and nothing could possibly break their bond. So, let's get this thing going. Alright, lap 6. Tinsel was still recovering at Mute City's task force base with assistance by the Stewarts, as well as a brief, concerned appearance by Phoenix Levin, and the couple had recently began to move into Falcon's fortress in Port Town. While there, she was ecstatic to be back inside the place without any anxieties of late Falcon's strict guidelines. She knew from that moment on she no longer needed to keep the location of the building to be a secret, which was quite pressuring when Jody or Dr. Stewart would query her, since she knew and worked with the bounty hunter and legendary racer. She was also relieved that Rick never seemed to act like a stubborn loner, and he was willing to have the help from others. It was just so much more reassuring that Tinsel no longer had to hide her true feelings from him, like how Douglas was staying composed behind the dark helmet and his intimidating stern face. When Rick was resisting Princia Ramode's charm, he actually had an idea for their song of their first dance. He shone her on the Stronghold's large motherboard, and then it played a tune first being accompanied by acoustic guitars in E major. And it was no question it was definitely in surround sound since they could literally hear it all around them within the garage. Actually, he first played the song inside his helmet while riding the Falcon Flyer back to Earth, and it reminded them both of one of Tinsel's birthday gifts to him just last summer. One of the 3 ancient films of auto racing known as The Last American Hero, aside from Days of Thunder and Need for Speed. It was quite inspiring, especially for Rick, since Elroy Jackson Jr. introduced the drafting method in auto racing, which became a staple technique. Tinsel didn't care for the biopic that much, but he knew she loved the main theme. Thus he had this idea when he was thinking about her, which is I Got a Name by Jim Croce. I wish I could play it, but I don't want to get in trouble because of copyrights. Damn YouTube. Then, as the song was picking up with a tenor's voice, Rick actually volunteered to dance with her. She accepted, but was uncertain since she never danced before, and she may forget the steps. He decided to record the routine while they got better at it. So, throughout the duration, they'd make some time to spend and practice their first dance to prepare for their union. It was then a month prior to the wedding. The girls decided to spend the evening at the reigning spa salon, which according to Jody and Lucy had great services and treatments from massages to her hair services. It even had a sauna, mud spa, and a hot tub. And Jack and Luna volunteered for the guys to go to Roller Rocket World for the evening as well, which was home to roller rinks, an indoor arcade, and bowling to all ages and genders. both of these places had restaurants, too. Jody and Lucy found it was a way to help cure Tinsel's old wounds at the Reigning Spawn Salon for the bachelorette party. This was actually a first for both the guys and the gals, as they were too busy with their own craps. She cringed a little while looking through the brochure they handed out when she came across the mud spa, though the hot tub and the restaurants were more her taste. She thought the first activity was disgusting, but the young mechanic informed her it was a good way to remove oils and dead skin cells from pores beneath her face and let it shine once everything was rinsed off. Lucy always wanted to have one, but couldn't since they were so expensive. No different than applying makeup, she assured. I never usually wear makeup very much. I'm like a tomboy. And my skin, it's so oily, it doesn't get along well. While Dr. Stewart found out from his son Rodney they'd be hanging out in Port Town, that somehow struck a chilling chord in his heart. His mind then shifted gears as he reminisced on that certain someone who was distant from him for literal years. Luna's biological mother and Robert's second wife, Catherine Wilson. It's another OC, made by Budscotch, by the way. So he typed on the keyboard. There was a profile. There was an image. Never saw her pic, though. I wish I could on DeviantArt. So here's the bio. Catherine Wilson, mechanic for the F-Zero competition, born and raised in Port Town. Catherine had spent most of her life studying about the F-Zero machines, as efficient and tenacious as the late Dr. Clash, and had always wondered what the mechanics were like to make those magnificent machines work. By the time she was 17, she registered as an F-Zero mechanic on the same day she had met Dr. Stewart. As a symbol of their friendship, she gave him a red scarf, which was the same scarf that he wore to this day. The medico ruffled the scarf, which was still covering his neck. When Catherine turned 21, the two had gotten married, and Catherine gave birth to a baby girl 9 months later. After being constantly hunted down by Zoda, she had left Dr. Stewart in care of their daughter. Her whereabouts are currently unknown. For Luntz, his daughter saw her father so somber, almost depressed. Not once in her life had she ever saw him like this. His eyes drooped as his face, and she headed in the computer room. She asked if her dad was all right, and his face broke as if nothing happened. He assured her he was fine, though she never saw the image and report of her missing mom. Instead, he wished he would see her again since Zoda had been assassinated by Rick and Tinsel over a year ago, and wishes to see her again when he heads to Port Town for the bachelor party. She hoped for the same, which she would see in ending it all. All the women took their F-Zero machines to their destination, which looked pretty basic from the outside, even with the neon sign flashing. The inside was a massive lobby with multiple pathways for different sections and activities. From the fancy interior, it was obvious they needed to book well in advance for the location and the party itself, so they split up and tried each of them out as they followed the bronze corridors. Tinsel was actually coaxed by Lucy and Luna to let her brown hair grow out and never cut it. It was at the Reigning Salon where they both got pampered as they had their hair stylized. The wife-to-be actually had hers with silver highlights and also flattened and curled to match with her cute style for her upcoming wedding. Mrs. Arrow, Mai, and Lisa got some golden highlights while Lucy's carrot top was being heated in an electric lampshade to add more volume. Jody and Kate were having their backs massaged, and it was quite easy to relax the captain's tense muscles, considering she's a cyborg. She was never afraid to admit it either, as the occupant had clients similar to her. Luna was just relaxing at the refreshing spa with Taya and Serenity. By the time their leisure was over, the group rotated activities until an hour later as the ladies gathered to grab some bites to eat at the fancy restaurant. They took 2 large round tables while their meals and desserts were being served. Like the travel arrangements the women made, the men also had to take their own F-Zero machines. Only they had little more hassle since they needed to take a warp gate to planet Ninte and endure the congested streets of Port Town. These paths were also linear, so travel was hindered quite a bit. When they arrived, the place was just so dazzling with all those dark neon purple lights and the large font screaming its name. The kids were ecstatic when they got there. They became anxious as they nearly scrambled out of their cockpits of their corresponding vehicles, especially since both Clank and Alias were sharing the red gazelles. Daigoro had to be held by Goro at times as well, even with the silver rat to be pulled by a tractor beam from the fire stingray. Like a dog, like holding in a dog with a leash. I kinda made this up. The children stormed in first before the adults did. Even Jack ran in after them since he was pretty much like a man-child. Rick just stood there and looked up at the place full of awe. The interior was even more astonishing. A massive airy lobby awaited the guys, rows of bowling alleys were to the right, restaurants were a little further to the left. There was a large and deep roller rink, and at the corner were the arcade cabinets, and a quieter section for the mere sensitive visitors. The men almost immediately diverged, each partaking in different activities. Super Arrow was watching over his baby son Archer, another OC by Butterscotch, as he excitedly played and dived around at the colorful ball pen. Rick and Jack recognized an eccentric kid that looked like a professional rollerblader, which was another idea by Butterscotch, and its beat from Jet Set Radio and Jet Set Radio Future. I never played the games though, I never had a Dreamcast, so this was new to me. The former thought it was Clank, but it only turned out to be one of the task force's indirect allies, Beat. Noticed he was one of the invitees who never gave back his RSVP. After some gleeful greetings, he explained that he was too busy and he wouldn't want to hang out at a wedding to cold feet. However, it was nice to see his friends from the squad again. Just then, a raspy, squeaky voice snapped Jack out of his reunion, and he was ecstatic to meet an old mentor, the nonagenarian F-Zero racer, Silver Nielsen. And it's based on the anime episode. I believe it was episode 13. No, I think it was 14. With the mentor Silver Nielsen training Jack, as well as Anthony Robkin. They made up for lost time. Outside the party zone, it was much more quieter than the raging activity inside. Dr. Stewart was taking a break from all the excessive input, and an alto voice made him look up. At first, he thought it was actually Jody, and she looked at her, but it was actually his long-lost second mate, Catherine. They embraced each other momentarily, and she accepted it that he loves Jody. She assured Doc he did a great job on raising Luna, and she'll drop her a letter soon, as the reunion would be too dramatic for her sensitivity. Meanwhile, at the Roller Rocket World's bowling alleys, Rick was discussing with the guys about Tinsel's repressed memories, those that weren't too preoccupied with the game as Super Arrow was. He was with Clank, Alias, Daigoro, Tristan, and Joey. Then the go-lucky duelist motioned for the future groom to speak with him in private. They sat at the row of stools several feet away from the bowling alleys and arcade machines, and Joey mentioned in a hushed voice that when he was 10, when Serenity was 7, their parents divorced. Their mom was a nurse while their dad was an alcoholic gambler, and he often beats Jody. He had become a boy who could never defend himself even against bullies, until his dear friend Tristan always came to his aid. He said he knew what it was like to have an abusive, neglectful parent, and he eventually decided to run away and search for his mom, only to have Tristan take him in instead. He feels so sorry for Tinsel, though Rick assured him that their future would be brighter than their lives had ever been. With full stomachs, everyone headed for home, and they would never stop chatting of all the fun they had throughout the night. At first, I was going to have these two attractions in Meteorland at Meteor specifically, the fourth location in the original Star Fox. But sadly, I decided to scrap it. I wish that artificial meteor would have been mentioned a lot more in the series, though. It's a shame we see this awesome place only once. I wonder if these two places exist. I'd love to see them. Well, those other two places. And that was an inspiration from the great Clements LP of the original Star Fox. As for Beat, it was an idea from Butterscotch as well as Catherine Wilson. So, I don't know what to do with them, so I just scrapped them. It was quite surprising on what I found out from Joey thanks to the Yu-Gi-Oh! Wiki, and how he can relate to Tinsel's predicament since they both had dark pasts and neglectful fathers. I can't believe the same thing seems to be happening, in a neglectful sense. And my parents too went through divorce as well as back in autumn 2019, which was a relief for my toxic ex-stepmom. And at the time, I was getting back into Ocarina of Time again. And that's when I was finishing the Lost Legend of Namira. I was watching those Zelda animations from Major Link. So yeah, it did help me cope with it actually. So, I'll see you guys next chapter. song is like, eh. Welcome back to another chapter of To Be Married and Loved. Last time, the men have actually participated in their bachelor party in Port Town at the roller rank world, or whatever that place was. And the women actually participated in their bachelorette party at the Raining Day Spa and Salon, also in Port Town. And those places were actually ideas made by BerryWatterson. And one of Butterscotch's OCs, Catherine Wilson, was Dr. Stewart's second wife and also Luna Stewart's mom. And they actually reunited in Port Town, and she actually understood his feelings for Jody. And she thinks it's best because, she's been very distant from Dr. Stewart because of Zoda. She's always been hiding from him and his daughter, actually. But they reunited, and she assured him that it's okay if he falls for Jody, although he has to go through another divorce, but hopefully it won't be so painful, unlike how mine was. So, glad that's out of the way, and the wedding is looming closer and closer. So, good luck to Rick and Tinsel. Here's lap 7. By the way, I forgot to mention the Roller Rocket Worlds and the Rainy Day Spa and Salon were awesome ideas made by my collaborator, BerryWatterson, from the bachelor and bachelorette parties. The Raining Spa and Salon, which have great services and treatments from massages to hair services, and even a sauna, mud spa, and a hot tub. And the Roller Rocket Worlds, which is home to roller rinks and indoor arcade and bowling to all ages and genders. Both of these places have restaurants as well, and they were inspired by our favorite places. And the next one is going to be quite tricky since this involves the date with Kate and EAD. Even so much more. This was not easy! So I hope you'll appreciate this, Barry. Alright, here's lap 7. Kate Allen and Mr. EAD went shopping at one of the prestigious shopping malls in Mute City, and she offered him to try out different tuxedos and dresses for the wedding. He was pretty shy about it since, he's an android, and his extra large stature would be proving to be quite a challenge for searching for an accurate size. From a worker behind the counter, she measured his humongous circumference, confirming it to be XXXL. Thankfully, they didn't have to rely on a tailor to design a super huge tux for the usher. Instead, the patron showed the duo a back chamber within the store that showed an XXXL black tux with a white undershirt and a red tie. She said that not many customers of that size come here often, though she knew it could happen since she has seen some F-Zero pilots with that said stature such as EAD as well as Drac. Kate was ecstatic when they found out what they needed for Rick and Tinsel's wedding only a fortnight to go. Until unlike the android, she easily found a silky medium dress as well as a matching headband. By the time they were successful, they can get some lunch, and while there, Kate decided to tell EAD how she was used by others and the week before she met the Mobile Task Force team, on how fans always pressured her to succeed and demand her to be at her absolute best. And since she was the youngest out of 10 brothers, she dealt with it all her life and her stress always built up from there. Since her parents were recording artists, she felt that going on stage and performing would be a relief, which was at first was. But her millions of followers as well as the infinite relocations she was forced to make were just grinding on her nerves. Even the more rude and obsessive fans that she wished would be put down like the ravenous dogs they were. Even while she was F-Zero racing, the anxieties just followed since other fans had expected her to win them, not to mention take advantage of her soulful vocals and unique physique, even to the point of being a naked model. All those stresses on staying on top on both occupations were far too much, even how the fans treated her. So, Gordon and EAD were the only dear friends to her. even while she was being hunted down by Zoda. She at first never cared for the ultra-sized machine and took away his memory chip. That was till his deep sacrifice he made, which made her have a change of heart, that even the most emotionless life forms can still possess a heart, albeit metallic. Kate realized that she thought, maybe they can take their relationship onto the next level. So she decided to buy something at a store. After they were finished shopping and having their picnic, the two decided to go to her mansion. He had moved there in May, which explains why he was seldom seen at the task force base, unless if the need arose for his well-coordinated skills as a mechanic gifted as the late Dr. Clash. As they got to her private, spacious quarters, she told him that she wants to take the relationship further by showing him something that she had brought. It was a condom. Kate then wanted to teach him of the birds and the bees since he's an android and that he won't fry his circuits while learning it. In other words, to consummate their romantic relationship. You mean this machine wants to physically join with a human? Is that possible? Let's find out. This is actually an excerpt from my all-time favorite Star Trek movie, the motion picture. Clank and Alias were so enamored with the movie-adapted documentary that took place back in 2273 as Admiral Kirk and his crew infiltrated the deadly interstellar mass known as the Cloud. Tinsel offered it to them personally as a nice little distraction, even for her, while EAD and Kate were finally making love to each other. She wished the process would have been the same as the emergence of Captain Decker in Voyager 6, even when Ilea stepped in. She didn't seem to like to think of how it'll turn out. While the bachelorette party was a nice distraction, it was still very temporary. Rick saw her pangs of worry from time to time, as did the stewards. It seemed rather awkward, especially if you were able to reproduce. Like Rodney said once, most androids cannot survive without their organic components, hence Dr. Stewart's formula cleansing Mr. BAT's codes that were corrupt by Black Shadow, which is an ending it all. Just then, an unexpected chirp emitted from Tinsel's key fob. Thinking to be just a lure to her sensuous moment, her hand began to shake as she held the device in a fish grip. Rick noticed her hesitation, so he offered to pick it up instead. A young man recognized Rick's voice, as did others in the background, while his comm was on speaker. It was able to carry on a long range as if it came from a ship or some kind of vessel. But the moment the young falcon realized the squeak, "I am Groot," he instantly knew it belonged to his distant friends, the Guardians of the Galaxy. That also made Tinsel perk up and storm off the couch. Peter Quill, aka Star-Lord, answered the call, and Tinsel was admired to hear from her favorite members Rocket and Little Groot, along with Gamora and Drax. Rick and Tinsel met them a while back while they hunted for a bounty, but they had been very difficult to contact since then. Then, the Misfits heard some rumors of them tying the knot, but they each never received an invitation since they were always so busy roaming around the universe. One time their paths crossed as Rick and Tinsel encountered Drax as he twisted the neck of a violent attacker. Star-Lord saved their lives as he advised them to leave while his gang took the wanted, though comatose, aggressor so they won't waste the dilithium crystal-based lens for the Falcon Flyer. Star-Lord really admired Tinsel's taste in music, as she always loved his playlist his late mom made, especially for him, before she died of cancer on Earth. A lot of his songs were downloaded onto her audio Blu-rays. The Guardians wished they would come to Mute City, but they'd always been distracted bounty farming. So Star-Lord requested it should be recorded, and Clank volunteered to do just that using his robot assistant tech. Tinsel and Rick said it was nice for them to make the call and notify them they aren't available for the matrimony, yet they still said farewell, as they wished them luck, with cute little Groot saying those same 3 words all the way through. "I am Groot!" Such a small world. I'm so glad we had the opportunity to meet these guys. Me too. By the time the documentary ended, the young boys left and were soon picked up by the Red Gazelle. Then, Rick offered Tinsel to rehearse their first dance as they had gradually gotten better with every step. They knew they'd be ready, just in time for their fortnight wait. Oh man, their wedding is in 2 weeks. And sorry for the short chapter, I just didn't have a lot of ideas. It was so awkward. Barry, why are you so awkward with all those sexual scenes? Ugh. Forgive me for misspelling. I used to misspell it, so I fixed that. Anyway, yet again, the original Star Trek movie, the motion picture, made an appearance. The previous one being the inspiration for Doxxer using elements of the Intruder Cloud, aka Beecher. What can I say? I find this movie to be incredibly underrated, and should be praised more since 5 is far worse. I'm looking straight at you, nostalgia critic. God damn it. Also, the Guardians of the Galaxy made an appearance. I like these guys, before their team was ruined by the events of Endgame. But sometimes I find the series difficult to get into. Heck, I kind of forget their names of the team from time to time, excepting Star-Lord, Groot, and Rocket. Also, there was this reference via the dilithium crystals on a Star Trek The Next Generation episode, but I can't remember what it was. I saw it like a month ago, and I don't know, I just made it up from there. Could someone help me out with this? I wanted to get this lap out of the way ASAP, and I didn't want to go too far describing Kate and EAD's consummation because A, this was something that I'm sure my collaborator can do better and it's out of my comfort zone. B, it's between a human and an android, which is kind of weird, hence the interruption with emergence of Beecher. And C, let's just say I'm saving a very sensuous scene for last. And it may be a little inappropriate and grotesque to show multiple scenes like this to various audiences. I don't want any trouble, and I have seen enough disgust as it is. Believe me. So there's only a fortnight till Rick and Tinsel's wedding. I can hardly wait! Yes! I can't wait to show it to you guys. Until then, this is the Ecron Writer signing out. Hey guys, this is Ecron Writer here. Welcome back to another chapter of To Be Married and Loved. Last time, there was actually a breather chapter with Kate and EAD, and BerryWatterson had those awkward ideas of them going on a date and actually taking their relationship to the next level, so it was very difficult to work with. Meanwhile, Rick and Tinsel had actually reunited with the Guardians of the Galaxy. They were involved in a bounty hunting mission and they crossed paths, and Drax saved them from some kind of an aggressor, probably human, because it was based on that Star Trek episode, but I forgot what it was. And Star-Lord advised them to save their dilithium crystals, otherwise they'll never return home. So, Rick and Tinsel back then actually met up with the Guardians, and they became close allies ever since, albeit long distant, because they were always busy bounty hunting. And since they were too busy, they can't make it to the wedding, although they wish them luck. So, their wedding is actually in a fortnight away. I can't wait to do this. I'm so excited about this. Alright, lap 8. This was when Rick and Tinsel got their wedding gifts. With only a week left, they were invited to the Falcon House personally, along with the mobile task force, as the duo were seated on their usual stools. They had to face the opposing side from the counter while their presents arrived through the door. At first they were pretty small and often wrapped in envelopes. According to Rick, who stayed true to his Japanese heritage, he identified them as Shugi Bakuro. Before anyone questioned what that meant, the task force members, along with Gordon and Yugi, whom the latter gave out Solomon and the duelist's cash, humbly gave the envelopes out to the happy soon-to-be couple. Samurai Girl wanted to give the couple his and the family's own checks personally, as Rick noticed the red-white emblem, just like the symbol on his mentor's bandana. They were encoded in Japanese, but there was a note saying that one of his colleagues cashed in the Desert Kingdom's gems as the pirates were stealing them from Prince Yoramode just before Rick arrived and the meteor shower struck. Suzuki did most of the work since she was presumed to be the most immune to the succubus's charm. There were over 500,000 space credits total. Tinsel was impressed on how generous he was for going through great risks for his own generosity to his disciple. Thankfully, no one was caught nor grew suspicious, but they were grateful Goro did so much for them. She was starting to think of Goro as a sort of anti-hero, no longer worried he and his gang could pull some cheap tricks. Well, only him and his ninja sidekick Suzuki, anyway. That was the only member of his bandit group that I actually like, aside from Dagoro. Suzuki is the only one I like. Rick had finally saw what was delivered by Bert's personal tailor, who was the same person that designed Bert's own tux. Andy himself was saving it for the night before the wedding so he could surprise this special couple, but he didn't want to wait that long. Through the thick plasticing hanging on a wide hanger from a tall pole, Rick examined the dark cerulean suit. It was exactly what he wanted. His suit was a phenomenal medium size, unlike Bert's tux, it too had a white underling to it. Or I should say underlining. The tie was also in dark cerulean, only had very thin stripes accompanying the shade. He also had a pair of black shiny 7-foot shoes, and his pants was the same color as the top piece. For Tinsel's wedding gown, it was just as she wanted from the small bank she paid several months prior. In fact, it was borrowed as a guide for the professional tailor. She felt as giddy as a kid on Christmas when she saw the silvery medium-sized dress with a delicate neck piece, as well as turquoise comets descending on the flowing gown. She too had a pair of 6.5 shoes that sparkled as much as seltzer. Bert offered the pair to have their fancy dandy outfits as long as they be protected by the plastic and left on the hangers until the night before their wedding, which was a good chance to try them out. The main gift, of course, was money, about 5,000 space credits each, tucked in a shugi bakoro, which had gold and silver strings that were impossible to unknot, even with the most coordinated fingers. EAD and Gazelle didn't want to untie them. The other gifts were given in ornate rice paper envelopes. In total, both the fiancés received almost 3/4 of 1 million space credits total, which they presumed it was enough to pay the mortgage for Falcon's Fortress twice, just in time to pay their dues before they make their official living quarters. After that, they headed to Port Town to pay the Fortress's hefty price electronically as the envelopes were being sent and the counter reached 0 space credits. It was all paid, and they still had several 100,000 credits to spare. They also noticed that there was a group of large elaborate drums with exotic engravings. Tinsel stormed over to them in awe. "Hey! Aren't those the same drums we saw since our first night in Giant?" "Yeah, that's right, Tinsel. Hey, there's 2 packages here." He lifted them up, wrapped in ornate paper and thin rope, and there was a note in which the elder received word of the merry occasion. It was a surprise since they hadn't remained in touch with him for over a year, since his people detest technology. Well, it's a more primitive part of Giant, aside from Baba. He gave one to Tinsel and they began to unwrap them. Hers revealed a silky black dress decorated. Well, actually, this is an outfit that symbolizes the black tortoise. And for Rick, it was the Ryu Suzaku, also known as the Vermilion Bird, with traits of the dragon. course, the dragon bird. And Tinsel is the Genbu, which represents the black tortoise and dark warrior. So, you can find those images on DeviantArt. Wow, this is great. I can't believe it's from Plant Giant. I guess it's so authentic. I guess because it's so authentic and organic. She really loved this sensation. And then there was Rick's attire. So, this is amazing. But how would the elder know about us being married? Picked up the letter again. According to this, he apologized it arrived so late as he was learning of the 4 elementals, in which their outfits represented half of them. As I said before, Tinsel was astonished Rick's machine was based on the Guardian of Summer, and she seemed to be the personification of the Guardian of Winter, as with him with his. No wonder, since her birthday was at the end of January and Rick's was the 28th of July. He's fiery while she gets cold-hearted, and his flames melt the ice, while her meekness quells the flames. She's more introverted while Rick's an extrovert. The opposites were staggering, and the outfits symbolized this. Even though Giant was known to house the 4 materia deities, they were impressed. They also knew of the 4 seasonal guardians from Chinese mythology on Earth. They wondered if maybe one of Goro's associates knew of this and possibly passed it on. While Rick offered to try on his enticing outfit as Tinsel followed suit, their eyes grew wide. They felt their last remark was justified since there was a large Tycho just outside the garage. It was smack dab next to the door. They probably didn't notice since its colossal size blended in with the dark corner. It was on wheels, so it was easy to wheel it in, even though it weighed like a ton. Heck, to add more convenience, there was a golden gong at the side. Girls certainly did drop it off here. This could be perfect to help themselves meditate, or... Just then, as Tinsel was looking over it, Rick took the long decorative wand attached to the left side and tested it out. She watched, and it put her in a state of entice. She then offered to hit it a few times as he went to change into his tribal attire. She immediately did the same before he emerged. Their wonder just overwhelmed themselves as they gazed at each other silently. Then, after a pregnant pause, Tinsel went and hit on the side of the giant drums using her hands in a steady rhythm. One she said she mimicked from an Indian ceremony she saw while she was a kid on televid. Rick added to her slow beats, and soon something odd happened. As if they felt numb, just like that night at Giant during the young Captain Falcon's 51st mission. At times, she stopped and began to squirm low to the ground and rise slowly while Rick continued to encourage her to dance for him. His beats became harder as a sign for her to keep moving. They both still had this desire just as before. This feeling. Then he tapped the gong attached to the Tycho's side, which let out a deep tone, and he motioned her to come forward. She slowly walked toward him as he did. Then they embraced each other in their warm bodies. Next they kissed passionately and slowly, their mouths watering, their hearts and pulses racing. The drums seemed to have made them swoon, and slowly they trawled to the opaque bedroom. With only a week to go, they caved into their urges. Not without protection, of course. Before they knew it, it was finally Rick and Tinsel's big day at last! It came just as fast as the full-power booster fire the Dragonbird EX once executed. At the Falcon House, Rick was seated at one of the stools while Lucy was applying his final touches of his cerulean suit, including adjusting his white collar and pinning the gold Falcon pin. He smiled as he looked into a small circular mirror, though it wasn't enough resolution to see his entire makeover. "How do I look?" "You look amazing, Rick," she replied with a grin. Lucy was wearing a headband with flowers that matched her white petite dress. "Finito!" she declared as she backed away. Her eyes gleaming, Rick rose and admired himself. The shade of his suit made him wish Falcon would be watching over the ceremony as with Dr. Clash, Atem, and especially Haruka. He asked where Tinsel was, and she already was on her way to Mute City's nightly course. Lucy took Rick in the Elegant's Liberty and assured PJ would take him and Tinsel to their honeymoon in Porttown. During the drive, Rick looked over the front seat, barely seeing the seating order on the small monitor. The seating order was rearranged from the front rows of seats to the rear. Unlike traditional weddings, they weren't split into halves for the bride-groom's sides. The intel read as follows. This was actually an inspiration from my rival's wedding guest table. I wanted to get programs similar to hers, but maybe I will soon, as suggested by Revived Racer. So, yeah, this is the seating order here. Alright. And finally, Bert Lemming had decided on a spiffy black tux along with a white undershirt and a red tie, jet black jeans, and black suede shoes, just waiting proudly on the track awaiting the groom. The scene in which Rick and Tinsel received the envelopes almost reminded me of a similar scene in Goodfellas, which is better than Casino, by the way, in which Henry and Karen got the same during the start of their wedding. I found the traditional Japanese gifts to be interesting, even the shugibukuro, and there'd be more customs within the next chapter. Heck, Rick and Tinsel need something to either help them meditate or turn them on, just like their first night in Giant, which is lap 2 of The Power of the Falcon. When I was a kid, I was always enticed by the exotic drums, those in the classic Sesame Street clips. Not sure why, but now you see how Rick and Tinsel got their own tribal outfits representing the Genbu and the Ryu Suzaku. I thought it'd be awesome to have the couple as personifications of the two. Also, I had a lot of complications involving the seating order of all the guests, which is what I've already mentioned. And it was before she left DeviantArt, all because of the damned fallout we had. Hopefully I'll be able to make mine soon. Can't wait to release the 2-part finale and celebrate Rick and Tinsel's wedding day. This would be the moment you've all been waiting for, guys. Until then, this is the Ekron Writer signing out. I can't wait to do this. another lap of To Be Married and Loved. Last time, Rick and Tinsel have actually gotten their wedding gifts. It was the Shugi Bakuro, mostly, and they actually had a few taiko drums, as well as tribal outfits from the planet Giant representing the Ryu Suzaku and the Genbu, respectively. But this is it, guys! The union of Rick and Tinsel Steelus Wheeler. Yes! I have been waiting a long time to do this. This is one of the best moments in my F-Zero timeline. And unlike Misty and Fox McCloud, this won't be so awkward. But yes, I am looking forward to this. I cannot wait to do this. Let's get this going. Alright, lap 9. So the big day for Rick and Tinsel Wheeler has finally arrived. Yes! At the finish line of the Mute City circuit, Bert proudly stood under a hanging arc filled with numerous fresh cherry petals. There were several rows of cerulean foldable chairs provided for each of the ushers and bridesmaids. The wedding rings glistened in a mannequin hand straight from the jewelry outlet Rick was all too familiar with, along with a triple-layered cup and a special candle. And the delicate 3-layered cake was towering at the left side of the track. Everyone was arranged by their own groups, such as Stody, along with their growing family, then Lucy and Leon, Gomar and Shio, Mr. A.D., Kate and Gordon, the Arrows, the Duelists, and finally, to avoid trouble, the Space Bandits were in the rear. Regardless of their positions, everyone but the groom, marriage officiant, the bride, and her escort came in pairs, then seated after Bert and Rick, who was awaiting his beloved in an anxious manner. They were each able to hear Canon and D being played by Thunderbolt in conjunction with the female pop singer's band, although they performed the said numbers subtly, while the acoustic guitars replaced electric ones. Of course, Here Comes the Bride had to be played on keyboard instead of the organ since it was a last resort. I hate organs. They're so hard to maintain and play. Ugh. By the time the atmosphere shifted as everybody faced Tinsel and Dr. Stewart walking down the aisle, Rick felt a lot more at ease. He glued his eyes onto the duo as they slowly treaded toward the finish line, then Stewart seated next to Jody. Tinsel climbed up the small staircase and met her soon-to-be husband. They reached hands and clutched them gently as they faced Bert, who soon announced moments after the numbers subsided. He had to wear a small mic to have his voice be amplified upon the airy chorus. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness Rick Wheeler and Tinsel Steelus in their holy matrimony, to have and to hold, through better or worse, through sickness and in health, and through rich or poor. We have joined here today to share an important moment. Through their time together, they have seen their love and understanding at each other grow and blossom, and now they have decided to live out the rest of their lives as one. If anyone were to speak why they should never be wed, speak now, or forever hold your peace. Ooh! 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 There was silence around, although Dagora was desperately raising his hand and murmuring, but his devoted father held it down much to his irritation. Ah! There was some small giggles amongst the gathering. After a few passing moments, Bert went on. And now they shall read from their wedding vows. There were 2 folded sheets of rice paper, and Rick took his on the center pedestal, which was co-written by his best man. The savior of the galaxy then cleared his throat and looked at Tinsel. I, Rick Wheeler, take you, Tinsel Steelus, my kindred friend, my guiding light, my devoted love and life partner from this day forward. In the presence of our family and friends, I shall give you my solemn vow to be your faithful partner through the good times and the bad, and in joy as well as in sorrow. I promise to be the complete opposite of your estranged father and your ex-stepmom, and prohibit any infidelity, abuse, and trauma upon you, and to personally heal your deep physical and spiritual wounds you have endured. I shall always love you unconditionally, to support you in your goals and desires, to honor and to respect you dearly, to laugh with you and to cry with you, and to cherish you for as long as we both shall live. The F-Zero veteran took the right folded sheet of paper from the pedestal and faced the new Captain Falcon as she said her vows co-written by the maid of honor. She smiled, trying to hold back her tears of happiness. She read her vows in a tight throat which later lessened. I, Tinsel Steeless, take you, Rick Wheeler, as my strong life partner and my one and only true love, with all my heart and soul in which I had offered to you. I will treasure our bond and love you each day more so than with any other man. I shall be your guide both living and dead as Haruka is to you. I will ease your flames as you had thawed my icy heart. We shall be as inseparable opposites, like the sacred Suzaku was to the Genbu. You had changed my perception on love forever, and for that I shall trust you and respect you, laugh with you and cry with you, and to hold you dearly through good times and bad, regardless of what our past and future may hold. I give you my hand, my heart, my soul, and my love from this day forward, for as long as we both shall live. Those are some very heartful vows. And now we shall light the unity candle. Let us all bow our heads in silence as we ring the gong and beat the taiko. Samurai Girl and Lisa Brilliant did just that. Keeping with Japanese tradition, Rick offered to use a sake-sipping ceremony as well. They lowered their heads, then after a while, using 3 flat sake cups stacked up atop one another. The bride and groom took 3 sips each from the cups. Rick went first, sipped one, offered it to Tinsel, and she did the same. The process repeated after she put the cup back with the middle and the lowest. The taste was bitter and it did burn their throats, but according to Rick's mentor, Goro, it was to purify them from inside and symbolize bitter trials. When the track silenced again, Bert faced the groom with great admiration. Rick Wheeler, do you wish for Tinsel Steeless to be your lawful wedded wife? I do, Bert, faced Tinsel, then she turned up to the officiant. Tinsel Steeless, do you wish for Rick Wheeler to be your lawful wedded husband? Yes, I do, Bert. The rings, please. With that cue, Phoenix 11 immediately stood up and walked quickly to the placid hand and stood in front as he took off the rings. He then gazed at the tall groom and handed his over. With this ring, as a token of my love and affection, I thee wed. Rick repeated the same words, then he slid it onto Tinsel's ring finger in her right hand. Bert said the line once more after Phoenix presented the second band. With this ring, as a token of my love and affection, I thee wed. Tinsel repeated the same as she gazed into Rick's shiny eyes, then looked down as she slid it onto his right ring digit. By the power vested in me and by the state of Mute City, formerly known as New York, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride. The pair then looked deeply into their eyes. After a long pregnant pause, they slowly leaned in, closed their eyes, and kissed passionately. Everyone was ecstatic as they applauded for the completion of their union, as Rick and Tinsel Steeless Wheeler and Jack, Phoenix, and Luna cheered. The reception carried on at the other side of the Mute City track, specifically just before the jump plate, which was behind a massive wooden stage. The crews of both Thunderbolt and Kate Allen's group had installed that large set piece, as well as their usual equipment, counting their microphones, machines, and instruments, 2 huge speakers, and the streams of lights tied in tall rods overlooking the guardrails. Bert had actually assisted to install the numerous tables covered in white satin along the chairs for each table were assigned to certain individuals. He also helped Jody and Stuart with the upcoming setup and the fancy ware and flutes. Heck, some of the tableware was donated from his own diner. And of course, the closest arrangement to the stage was for the bride and groom themselves, followed by the best man, along with the maid of honor and Phoenix, then Stody taking the second row. After that were all the ushers and bridesmaids in reverse alphabetical order leading up to the food assembly. Joey was the first to notice as he followed the mouth-watering scents from the wedding display. "Hold on, I smell something." Like a dog, he was fixated on them. "Getting warmer. Warmer. Woo! It's a buffet." He was indeed the first to check out the scrumptious selections. Everyone followed suit before they headed to their tables. One buffet suited the meals, while a smaller one suited the desserts. The cakes had been omitted from the request to cut costs, and there was always the large wedding cake wheeled next to it. Everyone ate and socialized. The food was amazing, even the wedding cake with all that icing. Of course, they all witnessed Tinsel and Rick cutting the cake, and also remove a large piece of chocolate. As she was finally full, Tinsel actually offered to have a private chat with Goro, much to Rick's amazement. He looked over at the conversation with just the two of them. Since Goro's Rick's new sensei, she told him of her concerns involving the opposite sex, that every man has their vulnerabilities even when they can't resist their charm and become infatuated. She hoped that Rick would have some kind of protection to prevent him from going astray. "That's why I persuaded him to stay tough, kiddo. I noticed he was growing soft once he got involved with you. I do not want him to be the same way once he lost to Ruka 150 years ago. He must stay vigilant at all costs, especially if he wants to be like the late Captain Falcon. You are the driving force of his life now, and he has immense honor and devotion to you. I understand your deep pangs, and he must stay strong. As long as he has you, as this ceremony proves, he shall never have that same fate as your damn dad did." That actually put Tinsel at ease. Whoever thought that Goro was this devoted and compassionate about their honor and safety? Even more shocking was the friendship Clank, Alias, and even Digiboy had as they immersed themselves with Goro like old schoolmates. Before she had a chance to look up, Rick came over. She raised her hands and assured him they were just having a personal chat on how his heart must not be tainted by anyone. Rick remembered it was the same warning Haruka gave him when he saw her in the heavens, as he was under anesthesia, while his mind was being restored from Dark Million. Of course, there was always meditation. The couple then remembered the taiko he got, though it had been tough for Tinsel to handle as she often falls asleep soon afterwards, or sometimes has a minor delirium. Heck, there was also a brief memory entering her mind when Jack suffered as well as Lisa tempted him in order to steal the Astro Robin, which was quite ironic since it was Tinsel's first race after her practice runs. Rick then invited her to their table as it was finally time for the festivities. He's certain that Haruka's new ring would be the guiding light he needs, that as long as he has that and Tinsel, nothing would ever stop him from losing his heart. Because he knows that Tinsel and Haruka would always be with him, and he'd never want another. Kate announced the first dance of the newlyweds featuring a song by Thunderbolt. Tinsel felt soured to pick Amazed, as it had a bad association to her old man, and the way he sang the wrong keys during the chorus was like nails on a chalkboard. I can relate to that. Being that Rick wanted to be the opposite and never open old wounds, his choice was somewhat different. Since they both loved racing, were proud on who they were, they made a name for themselves, and because it was the main theme from one of Rick's birthday flicks, chosen by Tinsel, they unanimously picked I Got a Name from The Last American Hero. They actually rehearsed some choreography for the song. Rick and Tinsel wrapped each other closely as they slowly sidestepped one side then the other in time with the song. By the time the second verse sounded, as the number grew more tense, they parted, yet they still held hands. With outstretched arms, they performed a few twirls as they elongated, even when they each raised one, to make their partners spin. Sometimes they would bring each other close and held their hands tightly while they moved immensely, especially during the instrumental break. And I'm gonna go there free. Rick and Tinsel faced the audience as they stretched out their arms. They kept on elongating their arms and spun with one another while they reached the rest of the song, even making Tinsel's dress swirl beneath her like an open fan. And finally, when the chorus finished, the couple spun twice simultaneously arm in arm, then stopped as they gazed into each other and kissed deeply. The guests applauded for their successful first dance. Tinsel then sang a number on stage with Jack's band Thunderbolts, as well as with the Super Piranha pilot and her crew, the duet Ebony and Ivory, upon the songstress's request. Kate then performed her personal song Betcha by Golly Wow, which was devoted to ED in conjunction with the new couple. Jack, the best man himself, also did one of his best tunes from way back, I Won't Back Down. Rick actually requested it as long as he requested that along with I Just Called to Say I Love You, remembering the time when Tinsel worried during one of his bounty hunting missions, and then played this song for assurance, which warmed her heart so much. He even chose the warmth of the sun since it was related to his birth season, summer, as well as the Ryusuzaku, resembling the oriental god, the vermilion bird. He also chose You Are the Girl, symbolizing how Rick feels to Tinsel, as well as Tonight She Comes. And finally, there was Kate's usual number, If Love Ruled the Universe. I love that song from the English dubs, but I just wish it wasn't talked over. I actually found this from Random Action Hour, the website Revived Racer gave to me. It goes like this. You and I just live from day to day. We never think that there could be another way. Speeding through space, everyone will see just how happy the two of us could be if love ruled the universe. 1,000,000 light years couldn't keep us apart. If love ruled the universe, look in your heart and you'll see that's where I'll be. Wish there was more to this. I don't know if I sing it right, but hey, I really love this song. I only wish there was more of it, like in a soundtrack, like To Be a Master in Pokemon. I wish there was a fan-made version of it. For the big finish of the reception, Tinsel surprised the crowds as she stepped onto the stage one last time. She chose this song personally as she was discussing with Kate, and she sang her heart out during the finale, performing an old classic named Someone Saved My Life Tonight. This act alone described how Haruka, Bert, and Rick respectively rescued her in times of great sorrow, pointing out the former's names, and Rick nicknamed Shining Star instead of Sugar Bear during the chorus, and literally saying goodbye to those who caused her misery, such as her old man, the succubus as she called Sally and Magdalene numerous times, as well as other mistresses he found. Heck, at the end of the bridge she cried, "So save your breath, the fires of hell you play alone." Then on the last chorus she referred to her estranged father she ran away from as she sang, "You should be at the rope and tied," for all the turmoil he caused as well as the people he associated with, plus how powerful she was over her, including financially. The crowd went wild, and Rick couldn't possibly be more impressed. Soon enough, he and Tinsel were on their way to the Port Town cruise. Sake sipping ceremony's popularity called San Sankudo. San means 3, Ku means 9, and Do means to deliver. This ritual dates back to a time when sharing sake created a formal bond as strongly as a handshake did in Victorian times. Using 3 flat sake cups stacked atop one another. The bride and groom took 3 sips each from the cups. Then their parents also take sips for a total of 9 sips, cementing the bonds between the families. However, since Rick and Tinsel no longer had any, it was just for them. Much like how Tinsel feels that certain songs are negative triggers, even I can relate. And those are the songs here, actually. Ugh. I hate casinos so goddamn much. Ugh. Love is the Gift by Shanice Wilson from the Bouncer soundtrack simply refers to someone who has passed, yet that person feels he or she is still present at that one moment. I find Forever a lot more suitable, just saying. I would visualize the Crimson Cannon, which I played. Someone Saved My Life Tonight was for the finale, and I wish someone would save mine. I mean, nothing really has happened yet. I mean, my dad is still, advertising himself. That's pretty much it. Besides, from what I've been through, I'd rather have someone that's the complete opposite of my old man. They don't use their wings as their topmost priority, but actually use their hearts, be more open-minded. They're not into negative things like alcoholism or looking for fights. Believe me, men have big egos, no offense. It's no wonder that females are the opposite species. I wish for them to respect what they fight for, cares about the other person's heart and soul, instead of overzealously losing them, only defend for the things he cares for, and also gives me the courage to do the same. And the final lap will be up soon, hopefully. Also, I finally found the lyrics for the song If Love Ruled the Universe on the awesome site the Revived Racer found, the Random Action Hour. I can't believe I've been saying the title wrong all this time. Damn! Believe me, I have. I wish there was a soundtrack featuring this, or at least a fan-made version. So, soon will be the finale of this short romantic fic. Although I think I need to add in more than one chapter to this, but, I don't think I'm gonna do the uncensored version, for obvious reasons, but if you want to see the uncensored version of the final lap, it should be in other places. I don't think I'm gonna do it here. And I don't know, maybe I'll do fan-made version of Someone Saved My Life Tonight in another video? Like a bonus? I just hope I won't get in too much trouble for that. So, Rick and Tinsel Wheeler are now officially a couple. Ah, man, this is the most exciting moment in the history of my F-Zero fix since ending it all. Man, I really love this. So, stay tuned for the final lap, guys. Welcome to the final lap of To Be Married and Loved. Last time, Rick and Tinsel have actually tied the knot officially at the Mute City Nightly course. And every one of their friends and family have actually attended. And they had witnessed their epic union, especially when Tinsel was singing on stage during the reception with the song Someone Saved My Life Tonight, showing her rage and her angst out to her estranged father that abandoned her several years ago and when he passed away. So, with the reception and the wedding done, it's off to the honeymoon in Port Town. So, here comes the epilogue. Final lap. After singing the finale, Someone Saved My Life Tonight, Tinsel felt vindicated, that her deep scars had finally healed, and that she felt whole and invigorated again thanks to Rick and their union. Even the husband said that he was lifted in that moment to a better place, almost as content as when he saw Haruka in the heavens. However, looking deep into her eyes, he said in a serious tone, "Not yet. There is still one more thing we must do in order to attain total bliss." They were interrupted as Kate announced the raffle contest, an idea from BerryWatterson. The guests filled out their names on the registry book during the reception. They were automatically entered, and 3 winners were announced by a drawing made by a randomizer programmed by the Mighty Gazelle. First place Jody got a huge gift basket with stuff, including a 300 space credit prepaid gift card. Second place, Gomar and Shio got a regular gift basket, along with a 100 space credit prepaid gift card, in which they were actually doing a tug-of-war with each other, making the crowd snicker. And third place, Digiboy simply got a gift bag. Just above the crowd, Tinsel performed the rose bouquet toss, though it was hard to see in the shadows beneath the track. Dr. Stewart caught it as he rose it up in triumph. The couple hoped he could finally tie the knot with the captain soon enough. So do I. I always wish Stody would be an official couple, especially its name. It was finally off to the Port Town cruise as Rick and Tinsel ran off the circuit and away from the crowds toward the groovy taxi where their personal chauffeur, PJ, was awaiting them. Instead of traditional messy rice, cherry petals were being thrown at them from all sides as they laughed and gleefully headed toward the alien's vehicle. Rick allowed her to get in before he did, and they grinned as they waved goodbye to all their friends, wishing them bon voyage. It took a while for them to calm down while the taxi headed to a wharf gate, although the spaceport wasn't as congested as it usually was. As they were heading towards the pier, they reached the planet just in time as the stars glittered in a sky filled with an opaque vermilion, fading to violet. The same display Tinsel adored since her first encounter during the Queen Lake 15 years prior. Rick tendered her as they both soaked in the scenery. It soon became official that afterwards, their permanent residence would actually be at Falcon's Fortress rather than their Mute City flat. It was now theirs, to Rick's joy, during that evening. They never wanted anything huge and astronomical, so they went with an average hovering yacht shared with a few other interstellar couples. They got settled in, then headed for the balcony to absorb the harbor's beauty. Even the isles located throughout the open up body of water as far as the eye could see. Rick remembered the night when Tanaka headed for Kate's concert and how Tinsel showed him on all the stellar landscapes Port Town had to offer. His mind shifted a few times from all those precious memories involving Haruka. Now he was grateful to share these moments with Tinsel. There was a constant chilling breeze, but it never bothered the anemic wife as long as she stayed close to Rick's side. An hour passed. Then they headed for Deck 01, which was actually below decks. Their cabin was average, though it had a thin paper soundproof sliding door, much like those shojis at Giant. Through their luggage, Rook took out an audio Blu-ray disc and loaded it into the slot. He then faced her, wearing that tense face again. Tinsel. Rick, she repeated his earnest demeanor. It is finally time, at last. They made the ultimate decision to go all the way. He wanted to be unprotected, as well as hearing an enticing performance involving the exotic drums of Giants and the taikos of Japan and Red Canyon. And so, they followed in tandem. This is actually the censored version of this slap. If you want to see the uncensored version, I don't want to show it here, because for obvious reasons, so just look for it elsewhere. He managed to download a few numbers involving the primitive planet's inhabitants, starting out slowly and increasing in velocity and noise, followed by a performance done with a circle of taikos, the same one Tinsel introduced it to him earlier. After a successful bounty hunting mission, she couldn't wait to show her beloved what she found, as a special way to embrace his Japanese heritage. Heck, even Goro had several of them, albeit some were stolen, obviously, and he was more than willing to give one to Rick. He did advise him that they're more powerful if joined in a group, and while playing one themselves, they can also receive just that. So, before the first enticing segment began, Tinsel and Rick dimmed the lights, activated the warm fuchsia shades, and dressed up in their tribal outfits designed and sewn by the inhabitants of Giant. Tinsel departed for the lavatory, then headed out, which put Rick in a state of astonishment. She sat on the bed slowly in front of him. There was a subtle warm-up as the drums were beating steadily and quietly in the background. Listening in on the assembly, their hearts began to race as they felt numb. Tinsel reached for Rick's firm cheeks, and his hands rested on her shoulders as they gazed into their eyes. She whispered, "Once you get under my skin, Rick, there's no getting out. I will accept the offer, Tinsel." They leaned in, then they kissed passionately. They caressed their backs, necks, arms, and thighs as they brushed their lips and sometimes nuzzled each other. He raised her neck. So did she on his. The heat began to rise as if Rick's ardency was melting the ice around Tinsel's heart, and the feelings of resentment she harbored for her old man for so long, while her ice was soothing Rick's feelings of bitterness toward him. From that moment, she permanently changed her mindset on men in general, as she knew Rick was her chosen, and he felt complete as his past scars were healed, much like hers. They each tasted their mounts. Then they slowly tossed aside their tribal outfits, all except Rick's majestic headdress. As their percussion was beating harder, so did their urges. Their bodies began to intertwine as they followed and got more entranced with the rhythms. They continued to explore each other more. Even Tinsel was curious on something. Rick began to taste her stomach and feel her all around, reminding him of the illusion that her body was like a sponge. When they started to get more aroused, she actually guided him inside her as her flimsy hands pushed him to enter her, while she opened up. Slow. Quick, quick, slow. Quick, quick, slow. Actually, this is the rhythm from one of the old Sesame Street clips. I wish they didn't talk over it. I'll probably show it to you in the description or something, but I wish they didn't talk over it. In and out with Tinsel's and Rick's breathing, as their bodies kept from splitting in two, even when she encouraged him to go faster like his dragon bird, as she played the mattress like another bongo, then increased more in speed and strength, even when he cued her to do the same. They then thrusted at times to feel the raw pressure deep inside. They held each other tightly as their temperature rose like the Suzaku enveloping them, and their hearts raced like competitors in an F-Zero race, alongside the percussion, enticing them more. He relieved some of the tension, yet they're still going. Oh. He made a deep rush cry emitting from his throat. In turn, Tinsel sighed in return. Boom, tap, 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 boom, tap, 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 boom, tap, 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 boom, tap, tap, boom, boom. The drums repeated their steady pace as if it was a mantra, while Rick and Tinsel followed. Together, it's as if that his mighty flames in her frigid innards were merging into refreshing water, an element which brings life. Well, fire and ice form water after all. They continued to ride each other, sweat gleamed, their hearts hammering, their sighs audible, their pants rampant. She invited him in further. They felt as if they'd reached the final lap. Tinsel wrapped around him as they each became raw as their reactions. The pace quickened, as did they. It was becoming overwhelming for them, yet they never ceased. Rick's voice became hoarse while Tinsel started to crack as they were beginning to cross the finish line and achieve first place. It was indeed a first for them, as they had no boundaries, as limitless as the deep reaches of the universe. They felt as if their bodies were splitting in half as they caved in. Tinsel cried his name while he squeezed his eyes. Rick! They finally gave away, like warp speed. They felt that time had stopped as they gazed at each other, agape. They were paralyzed, then gave in to their exertion. Rick collapsed beside her, and Tinsel could hardly move. All she did was turn her head, and kiss him lightly on his forehead. That caused him to come to, albeit lightheaded. That's right. You're mine, Rick confirmed. All she could do was paste a thin smile. Then they snuggled into their warm embrace before they blackened out. The galaxy is at peace, and aligned, just as they were. There was no better time than their own sacred union of the Ryu Suzaku and the Genbu. And as Rick and Tinsel Wheeler, they were forever inseparable, and were now one, both in the stars and within their hearts and souls. For the drum numbers, I would first hear the warm-up during the African dance in the park, then that clip as a lizard was beating one, making two birds dance slowly, then have it as a steady rhythm like the one in the Montana miniseries, albeit more tension, and finally the taiko performance from that. This is actually the edited version of this chapter. The unedited lap shall be released... not here though. But it's released on other sites, just to be safe, of course. So I hope you guys enjoyed this short story as much as I did writing it. Don't get me wrong, I'd still like to see Rick and Haruka's relationship go forward too, but I just hadn't seen much progress with them in the anime, especially since it took a long time for her to return to her senses and not use Rick as a punching bag. I hope I won't get any negativity out of this. Until we meet again, take care, futuristic racing fans, and as always, keep the faith. And maybe hope for the English dubs to have a second wind. Well, that's that, guys. Rick and Tinsel are officially one during their wedding, reception, and finally their honeymoon. And they finally found a permanent place in Port Town. That was great, guys. And so far, this is the latest, not to mention one of the greatest achievements in my F-Zero timeline. So, I'm not sure where to carry the series from here. I'm not sure how to use maximum velocity, which is my least favorite in the series. So, for now, this is actually the latest installment in the F-Zero series. So, I'm not sure what my next project would be in F-Zero or in general, so hopefully I'll have some time to think about it. So, until we meet again, guys, Keep the faith, futuristic F-Zero fans.